The sea spoke in gray syllables against Dragonstone. A slow gnawing the island had learned to outlast. Wind moved through the mouths of the stone dragons with a hollow, rasping breath, a sound like an old man sleeping. On the eastern terrace the rain had come and gone, leaving the world slick and raw, and in a high room of the keep the candles burned with determined flames whose light could not sweeten the salt in the air. Stannis Baratheon stood beside the long table that had once served Aegon's captains. Its surface was pitted and scarred by 100 knives and ink spills, a landscape of wars past. He drew a finger along an old gash, as if measuring it anew. Maester Cressen's quill scratched, paused, scratched again. Davos Seaworth, sea-worn and silent, watched from a respectful distance, with the eyes of a man who had learned the worth of quiet. "Write it as we agreed," Stannis said without turning. "Write it plain. Fine words are oil on bad fish. Men need salt. I have set down the names," Cressen murmured, squinting to bring the parchment closer. "Lord Stark. Lord Arryn. Ah, forgive me. Abbot. And Sam. Then? Jon Arryn is dead," Stannis said. "They killed him with honey." His mouth made the word into something unpalatable. He rolled a knot in his jaw and looked at the window where the rain had smudged the view of the narrow sea into a strip of dull pewter. "Put Lord Hoster, Mace Tyrell, Randall Tarley, Eddard Tully. Kevin Lan, no, not him. Tywin's dog does not answer unless the master's whistle calls him. Add Balon Greyjoy for form, though he will smile and watch other men drown." He tapped the table. "And the Northmen, Manderley, Umber, Karstark, Ock, each lord with men to move when truth strikes him." "And no." "And the truth," said the maester softly. His hair was white as flour, sparse where years had plucked at him. "Shall I set down the proofs in your hand, my lord, or in the hand of Maester Pycelle as copied from the books? Names and births and—" "Mine," Stannis cut in. "What I saw is what I swear. Write that I have read the book of lineages until my eyes ached and found nothing but gold where there should have been night. Write that King Robert's bastards bear black hair and the Queen's children bear gold. Write that the seed is strong. Write what a child with eyes can see." "And thou?" Davos breathed the salt and candle soot and thought of a black-haired boy in Fleabottom reaching for half a loaf, not knowing that kings and queens bristled like porcupines over his very head. He shifted his weight. Stannis had the temper of a drawn saw, back and forth, but it always cut straight. Men said things about him, prickly, unloving, joyless. But Davos had run his hands along the grain of oaths and come away with splinters enough to know a hard plank was better than a bent one. Cressen's quill went whispering. "I have set down the plainest terms. A matter of law, not quarrel. It may yet be received as a quarrel. It will be received as a threat," Stannis said. "Good." He drew a slow breath, a man filling a thin skin of patience. "Add that I withdraw my service to the boy until his parentage is proven before gods and men." "You speak treason in their ears," Davos said quietly. And both men looked up, the maester with mild surprise, the lord with flat disapproval. Davos lifted his hands a fraction. "I mean only that they will call it treason, not that it is. They can name a thing a lamb and make a shepherd of it," Stannis said. "It does not make it less a wolf." He turned to Cressen. "Fold and seal. Use my ring, not my seal, as master of ships. I am Stannis of Dragonstone, lord of this island by law and blood." Cressen poured wax with unhurried hands and pressed the ring into it. The candles hissed as one flicked a tear of tallow. Beyond the window, a raven muttered on the sill and pecked at the stone with a sound like wet bones clicking. "They will say, 'I seek the throne,'" Stannis said into the rustle of parchment and wing. "They will say it in Mace Tyrell's buttery voice, and in Varys' whisper, and in the way Littlefinger smiles without teeth. They will say it because they cannot imagine a man for whom truth is reason enough." "Some will imagine," said Cressen gently. "Some, aye," Stannis allowed. "Enough. That is the question." He nodded toward the window where 3 ravens had landed in a dark fidget. Send them, and a dozen more. Send to every castle we named. Send to white keeps and wooden halls. It is better to be first to truth than last to safety. Then Cresson crooked a finger to a page, a thin lad with a scabbed nose and fear written bold in him. Take this to the rookery. Bring Hob if he pretends the wind is too high. There is no wind too high to carry what ought to fly. The boy took the letters and ran. The room thinned of sound. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Stannis planted his hands on the table and leaned as if the wood beneath him had answers written on its heart. "Robert will not thank me," he said at last. "Kings do not thank," Davos said, and wished the words back even as air carried them forth. Stannis' mouth twitched at the corner. "No," he said. "They do not." When the letters went up, carried by black scraps of midnight from Dragonstone's rookery, they did not know they were arrows. They knew only flight. The first gust caught them, and the second bore them across the throats of the stone dragons. Across the thin rain and the thicker air, over gulls whose cries stitched the sky, across the narrow sea where merchant cogs shouldered each other like cattle. They flew over ships whose decks reeked of pitch and sweat, and garlic, and salt fish, and over boats. Older than their oarsmen, they flew toward the city that ate men. In the Red Keep, the day had the weary color of old bronze. Heat lay in the stones. Ned Stark was a shape of straight lines in a world that preferred curves. His shadow fell neat as a blade across the rushes when the knock came. Van Poole opened and bowed, and did not entirely hide the sour worry behind his eyes. When you counted other men's needs for a living, you went thin on your own. "Another letter, my lord," Vayan said. "Marked for your hand, and bearing the seal of Dragonstone." Ned held out his hand. The wax had been cracked and resealed by one of his own in the yard below, where a bird from the east had landed with the impatience of knowing it had been pursued. He read while standing, as if to confess to his own body that no comfort was to be had in these words. The script was Cresson's, precise as a chalk line. Stannis' voice lay beneath it like iron. "The seed is strong." Ned lifted his eyes to the window where a sliver of the Blackwater glittered teeth and blood. He had known, and yet the knowing had sat like a stone at the bottom of him. A thing you carry by growing broad enough around it that it seems not to move. To see it written in another man's hand turned the stone sharp again. Jon Arryn bent over a book, while a candle burned down to a puddle. Lips moving as he counted, and Robert laughing in a hall where the smoke thickened black as hair. Cersei's boy fair as summer wheat. Children were not to blame for seed or season. "My lord," Vayan said. "Send Sebaristan," Ned said, "and Lord Renly, if he will come. And find me Janos Slynt of the City Watch. Say I would be private with him." "Now," Vayan's eyes flicked. In a city of whispers, the loudest thing was a request for quiet. He bowed again. When Barristan came, he moved like patience given flesh, his white cloak catching the light like the side of a fish. Renly followed with roses on his doublet and humor at the corner of his mouth, and a weariness below it. Janos Slynt came last and looked from one to the other with the practiced unawareness of a man who had learned to prosper by not seeing things that could stab him. "Lord Stannis has put his hand to parchment," Ned said without preface. He passed the letter first to Barristan Selmy, who read with that stillness great swordsmen carry even when they have no blade in hand. The old knight exhaled slow as embers. "Jon Arryn," Barristan said, and then fell quiet, as if the name itself had been a prayer said in the wrong place. Renly read and laughed once without joy. "Brother Stannis at his sternest," he said. "He has a gift for making a gallows sound like a pew." Janos Slynt held the parchment at arm's length and ticked the words along as if counting coin. "Plain enough. Plain as a cudgel. Forgive me, my lord, but the city has ears and mouths. There will be talk by evenfall." "There already is," Renly said lightly. "Half the court knows that Jon Arryn was reading a book of bastards before he forgot how to breathe. The other half knows that my nephew's hair is gold, and his mother's brothers both look as if the sun had been busy with them. The truth was hovering. Stannis has only pulled up a chair. Stannis has only pulled up a chair." Ned felt the sea inside him, that long, narrow cold. "The king lies wounded, and may yet die." The truth will not wait for his passing. If he lives, he must live with clean bread and no honey. Bah. Renly's look danced to the window and back. Clean bread? He said. We speak of thrones, my lord, not kitchens. Castles rise on lies often enough. They fall on them too, Barristan murmured. Janos Slint cleared his throat with the mildness of a man who has found gold in a midden and learned to love the smell. What would you have of the watch, my lord? Ned kept his gaze on Slint. Men like Janos were a map of a city's soul. Hold your men close and sober. No brawls in the alleys tonight. If trouble comes, it will come wearing silk and perfume and a sworn sword smile. Now. Slint's mouth made piety. We ask no questions of silk if it is bleeding from a knife wound. We take the man what did it. Ask some questions, Ned said. Ask yourself who put the knife in his hand. Slint bowed. There was sweat at his hairline, though the window lay open to the river's breath. As you say, my lord hand. When the door closed, Renly lowered himself into a chair, as if it were a lover he could not quite trust. Well, he said, this letter is a match. The city is tinder. We may have our first cheerful night in some time. Then die no more. Men will die for cheer enough, Barristan said. They will die for less. I will not have a slaughter, Ned said. He felt the weight of his father's words. Zed's voice on a winter morning. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. I will not. He looked at Renly. You came to me before with a plan to seize the boy and the queen both. The letter changes nothing essential. I cannot do murder in the name of honor, and I will not strike at a child. Renly spread his hands. Ceasing is not murder. It is precaution. He smiled thinly when Ned did not answer. As you wish. I am not in love with my own counsel. But know this, Lord Stark. My brother Stannis' missive will set men riding by dusk. Some riding toward King's Landing and some away from it. If you mean to stand in the hall tomorrow and name Stannis rightful heir if the king dies, you will want more friends in the room than you have fingers to count them? Barristan folded the letter and held it gently, as if it could bruise. If the king dies, he said. We speak as if the matter is settled. Renly's mouth softened. It may be settled now, he said. Some men love a dying king less than the next one's favor. He rose. I will gather those to whom I can put my name. Loras, yes, and those who follow where he leads. A dozen from the Reach, perhaps. Some would call Stannis intractable, but even a stone has uses if you build your rampart with it. When Renly had gone, Barristan lingered. The king's guard is sworn to guard the king, he said. Only the king. If Robert lives, the oath is simple. If he dies. He did not finish. There was a sadness near his eyes, the bruise that does not show until morning. It would be a clean thing to have the loss settled before grief makes fools of us all. Clean things are rare in this city, Ned said. And when the old knight had gone, he stood with his hand on the window stone and thought of Winterfell's godswood. You could lean against the heart tree there and feel the earth breathe under your back. The only breath in this stone was heat. There was another letter, one he did not send. It formed in his head while he stared through the window. Robb, keep your temper on a short tether. Your mother will tug it if you do not. Tell Luwin to set the ravens to circle. If I do not send for you, you will come when it is wise, not when blood calls. Beware the boy, Theon loves the sea more than oaths. Be a lord of the north. Do not let the north be lord of you. He closed his eyes against the thought and opened them to the sound of his door. It was Arya. She slid in, as if the air itself made way for her. At her shoulder was the black shape of the Braavosi sword she loved with a passion she could not spare for her needlework. Her eyes were storm-colored, like the sky before it broke. You should be at your lessons, Ned said, and then softened at once because he heard his father in his mouth and did not love him there. What is it? Everything smells like rain, but there is no rain, she said. Syrio says it is bad luck. There is no luck, Ned said. There are men making choices. The city hears whispers. When you hear them, do not answer. Take Sansa's hand and do not let go of it unless I put your hands apart myself." "Then?" Arya frowned and made a fist. "Sansa doesn't like to hold hands." "Then hold hers until she likes it," he said softly. He touched her hair as if it would burn him, and it did, in a way. "There are nights when wolves go quiet," he told her, "because they listen. This is one." On the other side of the castle, Cersei Lannister held a different piece of paper, its seals broken not by courtesy, but by impatience. Pycelle had brought it with his greatest show of reluctance. His face wore a summer of wrinkles and sympathy. "My Lord Stannis is ill-advised," he had murmured. "Very ill-advised. The realm trembles at such rashness." Cersei had not asked him whom he meant by the realm. She read quickly, lips barely moving, and then read again even quicker, as if speed could outrun meaning. The window before her showed the Blackwater too, but from this height, it was a strip of beaten metal. A gull flung itself sideways through wind and recovered, with a contemptuous twitch. She could do the same. "So," she said, "my husband's brother has grown braver in his absences." Pycelle's hands fluttered. "My queen, this is words," she said. "Words sent in the mouths of birds. There are fire and swords for men like Stannis. I put no faith in black feathers." She tossed the parchment aside. "But other men do." "How many ravens were seen at the rookery this morning?" Pycelle coughed. "I would not know, your grace." "You would if you asked," she said. "Ask. And then put oil on every hinge in that cursed tower, and wine in the maester's belly until he forgets to count. We will stop the birds we can stop. For the birds already flown, we will have other nets." "No." She called for her brother by a name she used when no one heard her, and when he came. Rolling lazy, like a man who has decided to love the day or break it, she handed him the letter without touch. Jaime skimmed, snorted, and let it hang in 2 fingers. "He has always hated me," he said, "since we were cubs gnawing on the same bone. He hates everyone." Cersei said, "He is equal in that, which is a form of dull justice." She moved to the window, laid her fingers on the stone. Her rings were heavy and cool. Littlefinger will say long words and offer short coins. Varys will whisper apart and together, and tell both of us what the other wants to hear. Pycelle will put on sorrow like a cloak. Janos Slynt will be loyal to whomever counts helmets. In all this, we require only one thing. "What is that?" Jaime asked, amused because he thought he knew. "Time," she said, and turned to him with green eyes hard enough to cut her own reflection. "We will give the city a king it can see. A boy who smiles. Boys do not frighten men, but manhood does. We will make the crown gleam and hope their eyes hurt." And Ned Stark," Jaime said with a slight movement in his cheek, that might have been remembered contempt, might have been trouble. "He will stand in the hall and speak of law." Cersei said, "If Robert dies, he will speak more loudly. We must teach the watch to hear us shout. Gold for Janos, gold for the captains, gold for the men who stand behind them with pikes, and decide whether their captain spoke well. Gold is a language we both speak," Jaime said. Cersei smiled without humor. "And if Ned Stark insists on speaking his language, we will silence him. A night or 2 in some deep place will teach him the words he should have learned in the north." Jaime turned the parchment in his hands until the wax cracked again. A sharp little sound. "You have courage," he said. "I have children," she said. In the Tower of the Hand, Renly Baratheon moved through his retinue, like a fish moving through lilies. Men bent toward him to breathe his air, to drink messages they did not know they were receiving. Loras Tyrell stood near, handsome as a knife displayed on velvet. The letter had set a gleam at the corners of his eyes that was not entirely pleasure. "Your brother," Loras said, when the room let them stand apart near a rack of antlers a previous hand had loved. "He does not lean. He does not bend," Renly said cheerfully. "Difference is strength if you build ships, a weakness when you build bridges. The city will need bridges in the next days. Lay me a few across men's pride." Loras's mouth curved as if by habit. "A dozen lords from the Reach will dine where I tell them," he said. If there is meat enough and wine. If there are poems afterward for their wives. Then there will be meat and wine, Renly said. And poems if I must write them myself. Tell your father that if he wishes a king without a pox on his temper, he should look south instead of east. He tapped the letter folded small in his cuff. Tell him only with your eyes. We must not get ahead of ourselves when no one is chasing. No one is chasing yet, Loras agreed, making it a promise. In the west, the letter arrived into a room where the air had the dry smell of old leather and quince pastes. Tywin Lannister read it, and the skin at the corner of his mouth did not move. The candlelight set a shard of gold dancing in his eyes, and did not find much else to play with. He set the parchment down and smoothed it with 2 fingers as if domesticating its crinkles. Stannis, he said, and the name left a taste in the air like atomized vinegar. He has always been correct. Correctness is a kind of insolence when the world runs as it should. Kevan Lannister, dutiful, careful, stood with his hands clasped. Word will run ahead of our plans, he said. The riverlands are already stirred. Gregor rides where he likes, and men see a rider that large and think of burning. Now, they should, Tywin said, but only half to his brother. Send ravens of our own. Words are no use to us if they do not frighten. Let them say that Stannis' letter is a ploy by the North to undo the South. The Reach will clap. It likes to think the world is a theater of its own. And the boy? Kevan asked, meaning Joffrey but not saying so. Names had edges. The boy will be king before the candles gutter, Tywin said. If Robert dies. If he lives, we smile. We have smiled through worse. Tell our captains to keep their men from rapes and farms unless I say otherwise. There is a time for wolves and a time for shepherds. Then, in Winterfell's hall, where the rafters carried a smell of smoke that even summer could not quite scour, Maester Luwin bent his head toward the raven, as if listening to it speak the letter aloud in croaks. Robb Stark stood taller than he had a month before. Grief and pride had stretched him on their rack. He read and felt the room tilt, as if he were aboard a ship he had not chosen to board. The world's spine had shifted some. You could sense it if you were a boy and wanted very much to be a man. The king is wounded, Luwin said, calm as a cloth laid on a fevered brow. And Lord Stannis. He hesitated a fraction because there are names you say carefully when you live far from the city. Lord Stannis has sent a message into a world that has more tinder than rain. Robb's hand sought the back of the chair behind him, found it. Held. If father sends for me, he said, steadying himself with the words, we will call the banners. You will, Luwin agreed. When you must. He measured Robb with a look that was not unkind. When you are sure, banners called too early are a sail in a gust. They fill nicely and tear. The great Jones' laugh came from somewhere to Robb's left, a sound like a tree splitting. Lad, he said, you'll have me in mine if you pull a string on a whistle or sneeze. Time was men had ears for their lord's voice and not for birds. But this, he jerked his chin at the parchment in Luwin's hand. This is truth that demands a sword be near at hand. Truth is a cold wind. You don't sit by it in shirt sleeves and talk of spring. Damn? Robb nodded. He thought of Sansa's careful hand and Arya's scowl, and the smell of the godswood after rain. He thought of Theon, smiling with too many teeth because he had never had to count them before. He thought of his mother, away, somewhere in the Vale or already on the road, and of the distance between a boy's thought and a lord's act. We will prepare quietly, he said. Send for Sir Roderick. We will count spears and bread. And ravens? Luwin asked. Robb looked at the bird, black as his father's hair had been before it grayed. Ravens fly with words, he said. There are too many words in the world already. On the high road, where stone teeth rose from the earth, as if the land were an old beast showing fangs, Catelyn Stark read the same letter with fingers that had sutured wounds and braided hair and wiped tears from children's faces. She was tired in the way that you become when you learn how useless tears are to the thirsty. The mule tossed its head. The wind pulled at her hood. Stannis, she said, and the name tasted like tin. Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish. rode near, his face a map of scars and decisions. He took the parchment and raised a brow. "The truth has a habit of making enemies," he said after reading. "John Aaron died of the truth. Others may feel the urge to follow." He turned in the saddle to look down the road that coiled like a sleeping serpent. "The veil will be a rock. Your sister will not be moved." "She will not," Catelyn said. "She thinks fear is piety if you pray to it often enough." She took the letter back. The wind tried to tug it from her hand, an impudent boy. She held it and thought of a tower in King's Landing where she had once believed she would be safe for a day. A little day. Not even that. She thought of the boy Joffrey with milk still clinging to him, and the way Cersei looked at him, as if she had built him piece by piece, and could unscrew him again if she needed to. She thought of Ned, who would stand in front of a storm because he believed men ought to, and how storms did not instruct themselves from what men believe. "Let us ride," she said, and the company moved with that tired eagerness men have when they know they are heading toward something sharp. In Flea Bottom, a woman boiled bones for soup and named her Potkins Mouth. The letter did not reach her, but rumor did, rumor moving faster than any bird, down alleys and up stairwells, around corners where piss steamed in the heat, and past the shuttered doors of whores. In the markets, men argued over the price of apples and the color of a king's hair, and someone laughed too loud and someone else got knifed, but quietly, because even murder had learned to lower its voice in these days. Varys moved through the Red Keep like a ghost who had found a body to rent and was careful not to damage the furniture. He stood with his hands clasped inside his sleeves and smiled gently at men who would have cut his throat. If only they had been sure the blood would do what they wanted afterward. He read Stannis' letter when it found him and pursed his lips, not because he was surprised, but because he valued the art of reaction. A man who had no expression to show you could not be trusted to buy your silences. "Dear me," he whispered to the empty room where he had contrived to be alone. He set the letter down and smoothed it, a gesture common to men who do not entirely rule their worlds. Dear me indeed. He was already thinking of the next letters that would have to be written in response. Letters with apologies, letters with offers, letters with blank spaces men could put their own desires into, so that they would think they had been consulted. Littlefinger read and smiled with the warmth of a man who has put copper into his brazier and found it melts easier than gold. He went to Janos Slint with a pouch, and to the captain of the second company with another, and to the boy who cleaned their boots with a silver piece and a slap and a word about how men liked their boots to shine. He went to a certain lady's bed with a pearl, and to a certain poor knight's table with a roast goose, and to a certain septon with a whisper. Men who do not have armies must make large purchases of people. He had long practice. The ravens flew beyond the city. They carried unease to Old Town where the Hightower's white stone looked at the sea with an eye that had learned patience from tides. In the Citadel, men made metal into color and wore it around their throats, and talked about truth as if it were a stern aunt one must invite to supper thrice a year to keep in her will. In the north, the ravens pounded their beaks against the bars of Winterfell's rookery until the air tasted of iron. In the Vale, Lysa Arryn sent the letter back tied to the same bird with a ribbon the color of caution. She had written only 3 words: "The Eyrie is high." At dusk, the Red Keep's shadows grew long like spears being laid down after drill. Ned sat in darkness longer than the candles lasted, and then rose, a man disappointed to still be the man he was. He went to Robert's chamber. The smell of poppy clung in the air like a lover who will not be told no. The king slept and turned and muttered in a child's voice. Renly stood by the bed with a face that would have been handsome if you had not known he was counting something behind it. He asked for wine, Renly said. The maesters gave him milk instead. "He will wake?" Ned asked. Renly rolled one shoulder. He may not. It is like waiting for a coin you toss to land and hoping it stands on its edge out of pity. "I do not ask pity," Ned said. "I ask law." Renly smiled crookedly. "In King's Landing they are much the same. The law weeps when men ignore it. Men weep when the law ignores them." He glanced at the door. "I have men gathering in the yard. Laura sleeps armored. We are not the only ones who can count shadows. Do not move tonight, Ned said. He felt the words like rains. If you draw a sword, someone will think to draw another. The City Watch do not need much excuse. They have been given a purse and asked to keep it closed with their fists. No. Renly's eyes flashed. You have your ways, he said. I have mine. Do as you like with your honor. I hope you do not cut yourself with it. He left in a rustle of silk and steel, and Ned stood a moment by Robert's bed. The king's breath rasped. He smelled of old wine and the crushed herbs and his own dying. Ned had loved him once, and he loved him still in the way a man loves the songs he sang when he believed he would always be young. You cannot sing them again without hearing the cracks in your voice. When he returned to his chambers, he found Yoren there, black as the rafters where ravens slept. The man's eyes were as bleak as a winter ditch and held the same tired mercy. I thought to find you, Yoren said. There's trouble brewing like beer with too much yeast. Best we take your girls when we can, and not when the city chooses to give them to you. He smelled of fields and feet, and something older than cities. If I can put them in my cart, no man will look twice when I roll for the north at dawn. Ned looked at the night's watchman and felt something in his chest loosen a notch. Come at first light, he said. Arya will not like to climb into a cart. She will like the north less if she must go by river. She will like what she is told, Yoren said without malice. Or she will give me trouble. Either way, I'll get her to where men are less likely to count her and more likely to forget their own names. Ned nodded. He put his hand to the back of a chair and held it, because he needed to feel wood he could trust. When Yoren had gone, he called Tamard and Desmond and told them to sleep with their boots on. No swords are to be taken from scabbards unless I put my hand on the hilt first, he said. And even then, think twice. Tamard grinned in the way fat men grin when they tell themselves they are quick enough. Desmond's eyes were as flat and practical as slate. He had the good sense to be afraid without showing it. Outside, the city made a sound like a beast shifting in its sleep as it tries to find a softer place on a bed of stones. The bells of a sept rang for a wedding. The cries of the fishmongers died down as the last of the day's catch found rotten boards and straw. The Red Keep settled with the specific groan of a giant lying down on a knee that had never healed proper. Ravens took up places under eaves and turned their heads to watch stars appear where clouds had walked all day. On Dragonstone, Stannis stood again at the same window at the same table, as if he had not moved. Cresson brought him wine. He ignored it. Davos spoke the only prayer he knew, which was not to a god but to the idea that straight lines, drawn long enough and held, eventually make walls that hold against waves. Melisandre passed a doorway, and the air warmed a fraction. Stannis did not look at her. He looked at the dark outside and the slight quiver of the candle flame, and the wax that would drip whether watched or not. Men imagined they could look at fate and keep it still through sheer attention. The wax made a point of ignoring such vanity. The birds are flown, Cresson said softly. Then the words are loose, Stannis said. Let us see if men choke on them or swallow. In the barracks of the Gold Cloaks, a captain with a broken nose held a heavy purse and told himself that loyalty was a garden you watered with coin. He did not think of the roots because the roots frightened him. In the Sept of Baelor, a septon prayed at the altar of the Father and asked the stone face to give the king justice and the queen prudence and the hand of the king humility enough to bend, when bending preserved what mattered. The candle guttered. Rooks called to each other on the maiden's roof, as if trading jokes too old to repeat. In the Street of Silk, men and women learned their own news in the ways they always had. The way hands lingered, the way eyes slid, the way you could count silence like prayer beads. In the Street of Steel, smiths beat stubborn iron and thought of crowns. Half the city went to sleep that night thinking of gold hair and black, and what that meant if you were a man whose children wore neither. A baker dreamed of loaves rising, all of them, into a single impossible pillar that toppled and crushed him. He woke and laughed because bakers' dreams are honest even when the world's are not. At dawn the sky came on like a bruise healing, purple, then a sorry yellow, then the honest blue of a day resigned to itself. Yoren rolled his cart through the lower gates before the crowd swelled to its ugly fullness. Arya climbed sullen and narrow-eyed into straw and shadow. Sansa did as she was told until the world told her elsewise. For now, it had not found her. She moved toward the cart, like a girl at a dance who has been told to smile. Ned walked to the throne room with men at his back and papers in his sleeve and truth, like a shard in his boot that he could not shake out. Renly was nowhere to be seen. A whisper said his banners had flown at dawn like quiet birds, south, to blossom among flowers that loved shade. Barristan shook his head once when Ned's eyes met his. The old knight's face was a house with shutters drawn, but you could see light inside. Janos Slynt was there, of course, and his men, gold gleaming, eyes bright with the small greedy hope of men who believe they have placed themselves near the winning side of something they do not fully understand. Cersei stood with her son. Joffrey's hair caught the morning light and begged to be admired. The boy's chin was set petulant, his mouth too ready to show teeth. Cersei's green glance slid over Ned like a knife tested on leather. She had slept, or had taught herself to pretend to. Some women learned early. "The king will see you?" Ned asked, low. "The king will be seen," Cersei said. "There is a difference. One you must learn, my lord." She smiled then, slow as sap hardening. "Lord Stannis sends letters. Letters are for those who do not know how to hold a city." Her hand rested on her son's shoulder. "We have so much to teach you." Ned took his place beneath the shadow of the Iron Throne. He could feel the iron, old and patient, behind him. It did not belong to any man, however many sat upon it. The hall filled with the smell of sweat and perfume and velvet, and old blood longer dried than most men's memories could reach. The ravens had flown, and the lords had their letters, their warnings, their proofs, their excuses. Across the realm men counted swords and sons, loaves, horseshoes, grudges. A maester in Old Town weighed 2 chains in his hand and chose the one that would make him seem most impartial. A reaver in Pike held the letter over a lamp and laughed until the oil stank. A boy in River Run with the Tully mouth but none of the Tully sagacity kissed a serving girl in a stairwell and told her the North would march, and she ought to be glad to have him before the world ended. She rolled her eyes and kissed him back. The match had been struck. The tinder lay in squares and circles and lines, as if some god had played with the realm like a child's game. Men would soon learn whether the flames would run wild or follow the pattern the clever thought they saw. For a moment longer, the city held its breath. Even the gulls seemed to circle with courtesy. Then the doors opened wide upon the day, and with them, all the choices men had named fate. Ka. The boy king's breath came fast when they raised him up those iron steps that had drunk so much blood. They remembered the taste. He did not like the way the swords pressed light into the hall, the way men's eyes slid off him and onto the thing he was meant to wear, as if looking at a cloak instead of the shoulders that would bear it. He stood with his jaw set, as he had seen the hound set his before a fight. Cersei's hand lay, light, at the small of his back, a touch that said everything steel could not. Ned Stark felt the heat gather behind his collar. He had thought to bring winter into this place, to lay a clean white cloth on a filthy table. The cloth had browned at the edges the moment it touched the wood. "His grace rests," Cersei said, the words smooth as olive oil. "The realm cannot. Our son must sit. The city must see a crown." "Robert named me protector," Ned said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The old iron drank sound and gave it back in echoes. He drew out the parchment he had folded small enough to fit the shape of his sleeve, and not the shape of the hall. "Until his son comes of age." Cersei's look moved over the paper as if it were a new sort of insect. "And yet," she said, "the king has a son who has come of age enough to wear a sword and a crown both. He has hunted. He has judged which hounds to favor. He has learned his letters and his prayers. He will learn law," Ned said. He could feel every eye that belonged to a man who had ever stood a long time in the snow and learned patience from it. "The law has older teeth than any hound." Janos Slynt shifted. The gold of the cloak at his shoulder glinted as if it were amused. Littlefinger stood at ease, his fingers steepled lightly, his smile a faint shimmer like heat on stone. Varys watched the air itself. Barristan Selmy took one step forward, just enough that a man who knew swords would see how he had placed his weight, and a man who did not would think he had merely found a more comfortable stance. "The king's will should be heard," he said. "The king's hand should be obeyed, until his grace speaks with his own voice in the hall." Cersei's lashes lowered and lifted. "The king's hand is a northern thing?" she murmured. "We are in the south now." Sir Barristan. Men grown old in white cloaks should not forget their colors. Then so. Renly was not there to make a jest sharp enough to cut the tension without spilling blood. He had taken his laughter and his roses and gone before dawn, trailing the quiet thunder of hooves through the city's half-sleeping streets, leaving Ned to watch the place where he had stood and think. Even a shadow can make a room feel fuller. Ned turned, the will in his hand as palpable as a hilt. He was not a man to show papers when steel would do, but he had given his word to a man who lay dying with a boar's tusk in him and the taste of poppy on his tongue. He broke the seal before any other could, and the old wax gave way with a sound like a small bone. The writing had been Pycelle's, large, careful, the letters fat with self-importance. But the words beneath it were Robert's, and Ned had seen the king's thick finger stab the phrases that mattered. "It names me protector," Ned said, "and commands all to obey me as such, until the king should recover, or his heir attain his majority." He held it where men could see it. "The law in this land is not the color of hair but the color of ink and blood. I will not have us forget which dies the longer." Cersei stepped forward. The movement was unhurried, like a cat crossing a warm parapet. She did not touch the parchment. She looked at it until her eyes had stripped it to pulp. "He wrote, 'His heir,'" she said, and the hall seemed to lean toward her to hear. "His heir, not the name. Paper can be bent, Lord Stark. Words can be made to bow. A mother does not bow. A mother knows her child. Men? Seed is strong," Ned said, and there was nothing in his voice but winter. Jon Arryn died learning that. Stannis Baratheon has set his name to it. I will put mine beside it. The boy is not the king's son. The boy is yours and your brother's." Silence took the hall and held it, took even the clang of a dropped spear far back among the red pillars, and made it sound like a stone cast into winter ice. The hound's teeth showed, not in a smile. Men who had never liked him still found their eyes drawn, and did not smile either. Jaime laughed, sudden and bright, a sound too gilded for that room. It rang and died. Cersei did not change. She looked like a statue that had learned to breathe by watching men try to topple it. "You have a paper," she said. "I have a boy. I have a city. I have men bought, and men promised. And men who love their own skins enough to love theirs more when they see him wearing gold. I have time. I have doors I can close and keep closed, and rooms where sound dies. Do you have a room like that in the north, Lord Stark?" "No. I have a godswood," Ned said. "The trees listen. They do not forget. The trees will not keep you from a dungeon," she said almost gently. She turned her head just enough for the light to find her cheekbones. "Sir Janos." Janos Slynt did not puff up with importance. He did not need to. He had inherited it, in a way, from every man who had ever learned the trick of being important to others' plans while holding himself less accountable than the plans would be. He raised his hand, and the gold cloaks moved, tidy as coins counted well. They formed a wall without blades drawn. They did not need to draw them while the hall still believed it could be a place where men talked. "Take the queen into safekeeping," Ned said. It was a test he had to make, like the heel of a palm on old ice. "Take Joffrey too." Gently. No swords bared in the presence of the prince. Janos' mouth opened in what might have been sorrow. "I'm sorry for it, my lord," he said, and he did not look sorry. He looked as if he had practiced looking sorry in the mirror. "The watch takes the part of the city, and the city's part is what the paymaster tells it to be. There's no shame in knowing which way to stand when the wind comes." Littlefinger stepped nearer. He did nothing. He put a hand lightly to Ned's elbow as if to befriend him in a hail of arrows. "There is the simple way and the hard way," he whispered. And only Ned heard, and Varys, who heard everything. The simple way is to kneel. The hard way is to bleed. There is a third way, but it requires that you do something men like you do not like to do. Then? I know how to do many things I do not like, Ned said. Not this, Littlefinger said, and nodded to Janos. Seize them, Cersei said, still pleasant, as if she were speaking to a child about a game that had gone on long enough. Ned did not reach for ice. He'd had the greatsword sent north, unwilling to feed it the south's greasy smoke. Tamar drew. Desmond too, and the ring of steel came like the answer to a question the room had been pretending not to ask. The gold cloaks made their wall into a wave. Barristan did not move. Swords met. There was a sound like 1,000 spoons dropped in a kitchen where a cook had died suddenly. A gold cloak fell with blood rushing between his fingers and surprise already dulling on his face. A Northman grunted, as if lifting a heavy log, and failed to rise. Men backed away and ran forward and found their feet somehow. The Hound moved through it with that loose economy that made men either love him in battle or hate him more. He did not kill any of Ned's men, he did not have to. He had learned not to spend his hate cheaply. Janos Slint's voice cut. A butcher's call. The rear line of gold cloaks pushed forward. A spear butt struck Ned's knee in the press, and he staggered as the world shrank to the smell of sweat and iron, and the slick surprise of slipping where a man had bled. Hands took him. Not rough exactly. Not kind. He went down, because the weight of numbers made winter into mud. Cersei's voice called for quiet. It came. Slowly. Powered by the realization that more noise might make blood cheaper, and no one wanted that before noon. Ned felt the stone against his cheek, tasted dust that had been men once in a way. Hands hauled him. He found his feet, and his breath. Tamar was alive, bent around a cut like a man who did not want to show his mother any more ruined shirts. Desmond was down, and nothing could be done about that. Ned did not look long. Looking long made names. Cersei stepped close enough that he could smell her, myrrh, and pride. You should have knelt, she said. I have knelt enough. He said. To gods, to my father's memory, to the truth. You will kneel to other things before the end. She said. Janos, see him to a place where he may remember his manners. Send for Sansa Stark. She has a gentle hand, perhaps she can teach her father gentler ways. Ned did not fight the hands on him. You do not fight river current by flailing. You make yourself into something that can wait for a bend. He let them take him through corridors he had learned not for their beauty, but for their blind ends and their shortcuts. He saw Varys move ahead with that careful speed fat men have when they do not want to be seen to perspire. He saw Littlefinger drop a coin into a boy's hand that was already held out, as if the world were a well that always gave water if you showed it the shape of your palm. He saw Barristan take off his white cloak and fold it, his hands quite steady. The cell they gave him was not the blackest. It was a lesson, like putting a boy on a stool instead of a chair. You are not at table, but you are allowed to smell the meat. There was a cot and water and a slit for a window through which the city could send him whispers if it chose. It chose only a smell of tar and sun-warmed stone and distance. He sat, then stood again, because sitting was too much like agreeing. Outside the walls that had forgotten how to be anything but walls, Arya Stark lay under a stained blanket and watched the morning pass through the slits between the boards of Yoren's cart. The noises of the city came differently here. They came up low from the wheels, as if the earth itself were making them. She could taste dust when she breathed through her mouth and straw when she breathed through her nose, and knew already that neither taste would leave her soon. She counted heartbeats because Syrio had taught her that numbers could be a way of pulling the world into a shape you could hold. Sansa had not climbed into the cart. There had been a confusion at the gate that was not confusion at all, because it had been arranged too neatly. A gold cloak had smiled at her and told her the queen would like to see her, that the prince would like to see her, and Sansa's feet had turned as if music were playing. Yoren had looked as if he would swallow the man whole, and then decided not to. You cannot fight the river and win if you are a single stick. He pushed the cart on. Arya watched her sister's face for as long as it was a face, and not simply a girl in a pale dress in a crowd. And then just a pale dress, and then nothing but the shape of her wanting to run and tell and fix things. She did not cry. The straw would have itched worse. "Keep your head down," Yoren said once when the clatter of a wheel over a rut made her bite her tongue. "Keep your mouth shut. Keep your knife where it belongs until it belongs somewhere else." "I don't have a knife," Arya said, muffled into the straw. "You do," Yoren said. "You just don't know where yet." By noon the cart's shadows were different, and the air had the taste it gets when you are almost outside a city, and the city knows it, and would prefer you did not go. Then the road opened, and the last houses slipped away, as if they had been caught doing something shameful, and the fields came on with their honest brown backs. Arya breathed like a swimmer breaking surface. She thought of Sansa, and thought of father, and thought mostly, fiercely, of not thinking, because sometimes thinking was what killed you. In the Red Keep, Sansa sat very straight in a chair that had too many carvings, like a song with too many notes. Cersei sat opposite her with that same distant attention she might have given a mirror that lied very prettily, but could be made to tell the truth if handled correctly. Septa Mordan hovered a little and smoothed her skirts with a fussy hand that shook just enough to make it clear she was counting her courage like coins. "You love my son," Cersei said softly, as if asking Sansa to pass butter. "I do," Sansa whispered, and believed it. Love at her age is a house that raises itself quickly and leaves the corners cut. "Then you will write," Cersei said. "You will write to your brother and to your mother if you can. You will tell them how very unkind Lord Stark has been to the boy you love, and how the city is a nest of ravens that would tear gold from a king's hair. You will tell them that there is only one way to keep the peace we all want. Send men to kneel, not to march." Sansa looked at the parchment, and the quill, and the way the ink waited to become something. The Septa's breath was loud and fussy. Cersei did not breathe at all, or if she did, Sansa could not hear it. She thought of Joffrey's smile when it turned on her like sunlight through leaves. She thought of father's face when it did not smile, and how much she wanted it to. She thought, very practically, of the fact that here was a quill, and one must hold it correctly to write a fair hand. She held it so very correctly her knuckles went white. "What should I say?" she asked. "The truth," Cersei said, and smiled. "The truth is a thing with many faces." Sansa wrote about how sweet Joffrey was to her when they walked on the walls, and he said he liked the way her hair took the sun. She wrote that Lord Stark had threatened the Queen with ugly words, which was almost true if you forgot who had spoken first. She wrote that the City Watch loved the prince, because she had seen the way they stood very straight when he passed, and had taken it for love. She wrote that it would be so much better if Robb came to court and bent the knee, and was forgiven for the wrongs father had done against the Queen's dignity. She did not write that she wanted to be a queen. She did not need to. The ink knew. In the Tower of the Hand, which had become the Tower of no one, and would be the Tower of someone else by supper time, Varys visited Ned in his room, and brought him a cup and a look. The cup had water in it, and the look had sympathy in it, and neither were poisoned. "You should have played a different game," Varys said gently. "The pieces here do not move as they do on your board at Winterfell. The squares are not square." "I did not come to play," Ned said. He drank. The water tasted faintly of stone and mint. "No," Varys agreed. "You came to stand. It is not a game many men play now. You will be punished for reminding them it exists." He folded his soft hands together, the tips of his fingers looking very pink for some reason. Ned did not care to know. "I can put a knife in a place. I can open a door at a time. But I cannot turn gold to lead or fear to love." "Open a door," Ned said. "Let the girl go. Both girls, if there is mercy left in this place." "One is gone already," Varys said. "I had nothing to do with that. Someone wiser than I acted. The other is a reed bent by a soft wind. The wind is pleasant now. It will change." He looked toward the slit of the window, toward a patch of sky too small to mean anything. "Renly runs to roses. That will have its consequence. Lord Stannis sends birds into cages that do not like their doors open. That will have its consequence too. Lord Tywin, Lord Tywin has always liked to set fires and then say he is cold. Men will die who need not, Ned said, not hoping for an answer. They always do, Varys murmured. And sometimes men live who need not. The gods keep their own books and do not show them to me. Then speak of the living you can move, Ned said. You are not here to sympathize, Lord Varys. You want me to do a thing. Speak it. Varys' mouth smiled and did not quite reach his eyes. Confess, he said. Speak the words they want to hear. Tell the city you lied. Tell it you sought to unseat the queen and her son out of envy for a family fairer than your own. Tell it you were misled by Stannis. Tell it you are sorry. Kneel in the square where men can see you, and the boy will forgive. The queen will forgive. As befits a mother. As befits a mother. Ned stared at him until the man's smile dried like spilt wine in sun. You would have me teach the city that truth is what the strong say it is. I would have you alive, Varys said simply. I would have the realm take a breath. Men are running to banners. If they can be made to sit down and drink, they will sing again. Songs are cheaper than swords. Ned turned his head to the slit of a window. A gull crossed, a white slash. The room smelled of stone. He thought of his father on Baelor's steps, of Brandon and his wild words, of the way the city had watched as if watching could make the end a little different. If I speak lies, he said, the North will know. My children will know. The gods will know. The gods, Varys said, are far and men are near. You have a daughter within reach of one woman's will. I do not speak to your gods. I speak to your blood. He rose, soft as a pillow. Think on it. Some truths can be postponed. It is a sort of courtesy. When he had gone, the room felt smaller, as if he had taken some air with him. Ned put his hand against the wall. The stone did not answer. He sank onto the cot, finally, because standing too long is its own kind of surrender, and you may as well pick the ones that leave you still able to think. He thought. The thoughts sat like ravens do, shifting their feet when they grew bored and coming back to stillness again, peering with that sideways glance that sees more than you hope. On Dragonstone, the letters had begun to return like fish following the boat. They came wrapped in courtesies and scented wax, and lies the writers had told themselves first. Stannis read each and said nothing until he had finished, and then said very little. Davos stood and watched the tide of words hit a man who had never learned to swim in flattery. Lord Manderley writes that he will pray, Cresson murmured, peering at his own neat script, as if it might have changed since he had set it down from the raven's leg. He says he will pray thunderously. Good, Stannis said. Let him tell the gods what I have told men. If the gods have eyes, they will not need his words. Randyll Tarly writes that the law is the law, Davos put in, turning the folded parchment over in his hands. He could not help it. The paper felt expensive, and smelt faintly of lavender and horses. He does not say which law he means. The one he likes best today, Stannis said. Randyll Tarly has a hard face and a soft heart for whomever made him feel less than he believes he is. He will not love Joffrey. He does not love me. He loves the king that makes him feel most himself. A reply from the Vale, Cresson said, placing a small taut note in Stannis' hand. It says nothing. It says the Eyrie is high, Stannis said, after reading. Lysa Arryn would nail her own door shut and call it piety. She will not move. We will count her as a rock in a river and pass her by. A letter from Old Town came with many words and little meat. A letter from White Harbor with few words and heavy cautious meaning. A letter from Storm's End with none at all, which was answer enough. Courtnay Penrose would not spend ink on a man he did not yet kneel to. Renly rides, Davos said. I hear he rides south with men who love him and with flowers in their path. Renly is a green cloak over a wolf's den, Stannis said. He will make the Reach feel handsome. It likes that. He will not make it honorable. Melisandre came then, as if summoned by any mention of things men called honorable. Her red hair had its own light in that gray place. You have set fire to wet wood, she said mildly. It will burn, but you will cough. Let me cough, Stannis said, and did not look at her. Bring me men who like smoke at least enough to breathe it. You could set a different fire. She murmured, stepping near enough that Davos could feel the heat she brought with her, though she did not touch flame. You could light the night with a name and men would come to it like moths. There are names hidden in your blood. I have a name, Stannis said. I am not in the habit of digging for another in my veins. That way lies leeching and madness, by my reckoning. By your reckoning, she echoed, not vexed. Men have won wars with less than you carry. Men have lost wars with more. There is a power in walls, Lord Stannis. There is a power in fires men see from far away, and in the way they think about that fire when they lie on their backs in the dark. Men and Tywin. Cresson watched them with the exhausted sadness of a father who had seen two children he loved take opposite ends of a stubborn rope and pull. The law, he said softly, as to himself. The law is a light as well, if men let it be. Men do not, Stannis said. They prefer lamps they can smell and stand near for warmth. He lifted another letter. The wax bore a lion. The script beneath was smooth and assured, and full of words that had been polished in their minds before they had been inked. He read it twice and did not show it to Davos. Tywin Lannister promises to be reasonable, he said at last. Reasonable in what? Davos asked. In destroying me slowly, Stannis said. In letting me watch it be done with good manners. In the west, Tywin's reasonable had already put men in saddles. Gregor Clegane rode with 200 good horses, and twice as many bad souls behind him, and the Riverlands felt his approach like a fever felt the doctor's knife. Villages burned that had never had cause to think of politics beyond whether ale at Wentz Fair was cheaper than at Heddle's. Men with Tully trout on their surcoats gathered like rain in the low fields, and looked at their lord's son with the half-hope men bring to a physician whose hand shakes. Edmure Tully tried not to let them see his hand shake. He had ridden out with banners and horns, and intended to be very brave. Bravery is a sort of lace some men like to sew on their deeds. It looks very well until it catches on something and rips. He sent letters to his father, and letters to his sister, and letters to men whose names he had always admired, and he rode to the fords with the belief that he could block a river with little more than will. On the high road, Catelyn and Brynden had reached a place where the path narrowed, and the wind came like a voice speaking straight into your ear. Tyrion Lannister was no longer with them. He had gone ahead to his own chapter in this tangle, and Catelyn had learned to her cost that setting one wrong right often lit 3 smaller wrongs in its wake. She held Stannis a letter in her glove and did not take it out. She could feel its corners even without touching it, the way a sword at your back makes you stand and walk a little differently. My sister will not be moved, she said again. Because you sometimes must say a truth until it either goes away or settles into a thing you can live with. We will move around her, Brynden said. Rocks are for rivers. She is my sister, Catelyn said. But not your river, Brynden said, with that gentleness hard men learn late. She is her own weather. We will bring ours. There will be storms enough for everyone before this is over. Bam? In Winterfell, Robb ran his hand along the grain of the table where his father had eaten, and where he had been told not to play at nights, because tables are for food and men who sit at them should keep their knees still. He sent for Sir Roderick and Theon and the Greatjon, and told them to count quietly, to lay out spears like knives on a board, and see if there would be meat enough to go with them. He did not yet call the banners. He thought of Sansa's letter and his mouth went hard. She says, "Come to court," Theon said, with a grin that did not reach any place that mattered. She says kneel and kiss the boy's ring, and he will be very gracious. She is a child, Robb said. She writes what men tell her to write and believes it because she must. If the queen stood behind me, I would write her words too. I would not like it, but I would do it. You would not, Theon said, amused. Not if you were your father's son. I am my father's son, Robb said, and for a moment the room held his voice like a cup holds wine, and then remembers to let it go. Roderick Castle cleared his throat. Bread first, he said. Bread and salt and barrels. Spears mean nothing to men who cannot walk the second day for hunger. Then count bread, Robb said, grateful to anyone who would let him be a lord in ways that did not require him to read his sister's soft hand and feel hard toward it. By evening the city had absorbed its own day with that animal satisfaction it achieves whenever blood has been spilled in tidy measures. The throne room stood empty and smelled of iron. The dungeons held a northern lord with gray in his hair and lessons on his tongue that had not found ears enough to take them. The queen drank wine with her brother and talked of what it meant to be owed things and to collect them. Littlefinger sat contentedly in a place where shadows overlapped and counted, not coin but favors. Varys drifted, very softly, through a room where candles burned with a discipline that would have pleased old men. Janos Slynt slept with his hand on a purse, as if it could go bad overnight like meat. Sansa dreamed of writing a prettier letter and woke to the knowledge that prettiness had nothing to do with it. Arya did not dream. She had learned in a day how to close her eyes the way alley cats do, with their claws still sheathed, but not entirely. She lay between sacks that smelt of barley and men who smelt of other men and horse and road, and the cart creaked a lullaby the way only rickety things can. At Dragonstone the gulls cried like children. Davos walked the lower hall and felt the sea under the stone, the way a man's steady pulse sits under a fever. Stannis stood at a tower window, as he had thought he would, and imagined a line running straight between this basalt perch and the chair of knives that tried to pretend it was a throne. Men would call him grasping for that line, greedy, bitter. They would not see the way he had kept his hand off it when it ran past him to his brother twice. They would not care. Men rarely cared for the specific weight of a thing. They cared for the gleam. "Tell me," Stannis said without turning, when Davos came in, "if I name myself." "And many will come. Enough to begin," Davos said. He did not lie. Not enough to finish. If you begin clean, more may join who would not if you began dirty. Clean, Stannis said, as if tasting a word he did not expect to like. "There is no clean in men, Davos. There is only less filth. But I will begin with less. You have the letter," Davos said. "You have truth. You have law. You have ships. You have the North in its bones. Use what you have." "I will," Stannis said. "And when the time comes, I will take what I am owed. Not before, not after. The realm is not a roast a man can pick at from whichever end looks better done." He finally turned. His face was a study in geology. Lines laid down by pressure, by time, not by whim. Send a ship to Storm's End. Send 2 to White Harbor. Send a man to the Dornish, though they will answer slowly if they answer at all. Send a message to the Wall. The realm has a king even if the king is not called. Let them remember it. "To the Wall?" Davos said, surprised. "There are men there who will not care who wears a crown so long as their bellies are full and their cloaks whole." "They should care," Stannis said. "If they do not, we will teach them. The realm's borders do not end at its courtiers' comfort. They end where men stand with spears and say so. If they do not say so, the borders end closer. I do not like borders to move, except when I move them." "Men?" Davos bowed his head. "Ace, you say?" He left Stannis to his sea, and his thoughts and his stubbornness, which had kept him more honest company than most men did. He passed Melisandre in a lower passage, and she smiled at him as if she had been told his name by the fire. "You carry a worry," she said. "I carry many," Davos said. "It is a habit from a life where forgetting one meant a rope with a noose. Your lord will find a rope with a crown if he does not look for other knots," she said. "He will find the law," Davos said, and kept walking. "Because arguing with firelight is a fool's errand unless you like to feel your eyebrows singe." The next morning brought no rain, only the hard honesty of a blue sky that did nothing for men in cells. Varys came again to Ned. He did not sit. "Your daughter has written," he said. "She would," Ned said, feeling the weight of a thing he could not hold. She loves words that make girls and songs happy. The Queen has asked the small council to consider a confession, Varys said. She is not without mercy. She is a mother, and mothers like mercy when it is theirs to bestow. Mercy is cheaper when the men who receive it cost you nothing, Ned said. He put his hands on his knees and felt the hollows where muscles began to forget uses they had yesterday. If I confess, what then? Then you are sent to the wall, Varys said. You put your honor in a place where men wear black and call the sky their only roof. You never see your home again. You live. Bendabaniso. And if I do not? Varys' eyes were very soft. Then you do not. Ned looked at the slit of light and the strip of sky and imagined snow. He felt the ache of it in his bones, a remembered hurt he found himself lonely for. He thought of Jon, and of a boy with a wolf's eyes who did not yet know how often the world would want to take things from him, because he held them too well. He thought of Robb standing where he himself had stood, trying to find out which parts of himself were bone and which were meat. He thought of Sansa, who would believe the world was a song until the world told her it was not. Of Arya, who would fight the world and would need someone to teach her which fights were worth the knuckles. He thought of Bran and Rickon, small, and of the heart tree that had watched him grow and judged him with a slaughterman's clean justice. Tell the Queen, he said, that I will do what is best for my children. Varys inclined his head as if he had expected no less and no more. I will tell her, he said. She will be pleased. Do not use that word, Ned said, with a gentleness that surprised them both. Not about what comes next. In the Riverlands, the fords became the throat of a song men tried to sing loudly enough to drown out the sound of their own fear. Edmure put pikemen in lines that looked very straight, and then looked less straight when men began to think of how it would feel to have a horse weight come along that straightness. News came riding. Gregor here, Gregor there, Gregor burning, Gregor laughing. And the letters Stannis had sent seemed to belong to a different kind of world altogether. A world where men thought while they ate and did not have to choose between swallowing and speaking. At Riverrun, Hoster Tully lay with his breath as shallow as a man wading a stream and wishing it were not so cold. He listened to the words his maester read, and the words his son sent, and the words the gods did not. He raised his hand once and touched the air, as if the river had run its course through the room. Tansy, he said, to a past only he was still in. Catelyn arrived to find Lysa as immovable as prophecy. The Eyrie rose white upon white, like promises men make when they are young, and broke hearts like them too if you tried to live up there too long. Lysa read Stannis' letter, and shivered as if a cold drift had come through walls that did not allow drafts. He wants us to come down where the world can touch us, she said. He wants my son to be seen. I will not. He wants the law, Catelyn said. I want my husband. I will take either today. And you would take a noose, Lysa said with that blank look she had when she thought she was being clever. You would put it around your neck yourself if it looked like a belt. She kissed her son's hair and stared at the door as if men might come through it if you dared to imagine they would. We will be high. We will be safe. Nothing is safe, Catelyn said very softly. Not even up here. Only quicker or slower. Lysa did not hear her, because you cannot hear anything through a wind you have decided is song. Renly reached Bitterbridge with laughter still at his heels, and men who loved the way he made their armor feel lighter. Mace Tyrell put a hand like a ham on his shoulder, and said very reasonable things about banners and bread, and the way the realm liked to be fed and sung to. Loras looked at them both, as if the space between them were a scabbard his brother could be put into. Renly smiled his easy smile, and listened to the way the Reach made its own music, when it counted its harvests and its honors. Stannis' letters were forgotten here, except as a thing to point to and say, see, the east is stern, the south is sweet. You would be a good king, Mace said sententiously, as men do when they want you to believe what they have already decided to try to make true. I would be a pretty one, Renly said, and made them laugh, and did not say the way he had seen the hall tilt when his nephew had stood on those iron steps. Back in King's Landing the sun leaned, grudgingly, toward the west. A platform was built before the Sept of Baelor with the brutal efficiency men show when they have decided to pretend something is holy. Sansa watched it from a window and turned her face into the lace at her sleeve and breathed in its dust and imagined it smelled of winter roses. Cersei chose a gown that made her look like a lioness swathed in late light. Joffrey practiced frowning at his reflection and was pleased with how kingly it looked, until he forgot and smiled. In the black cells below the Red Keep, where a different sort of breath is drawn, men who had done worse than tell the truth, and men who had done no worse than be useful to someone else lay and counted heartbeats, the way Arya had. They counted for their own reasons. One counted for his mother, one for his dog, one because numbers were the last thing he could make obey him. Ned was brought up toward evening. The stairs turned the same way steps take you when you dream you are falling. He let them bring him. He had told Varys yes, with all the no in him still a part of the word. He had told himself he would cheat this place, for his children. He had made himself a liar for that. He walked with it as you walk with a stone in your boot, hating it, and knowing you have chosen it. The square before the Sept held the city, the way a bowl holds a stew, thick and steaming, and full of things you never quite identify before you eat them. The sun made the steps white enough to hurt. Bells were ready to be rung in ways they were not meant to be rung. Sansa was there. She stood in a place Cersei had chosen where her face could be seen when it did the work Cersei wanted it to do. She had been told to be brave, and she was being brave, which is a word that covers many kinds of silence. Joffrey stood with his mother's hand a whisper at his back when it needed to be, and nothing when it did not. The High Septon sweated inside his crust of crystals, and spoke words that rolled off the day like fat off a roast. Littlefinger watched men who watched other men, and took bets with himself in his head. Janos Slynt stood as straight as greed will let a man stand. Varys watched everything. He saw Arya on a cart moving away from the city in his mind, and he saw Sansa like a cup men would drink from, and pass around until they dropped it. He saw the way the light fell down the steps, and how that would make the blood look if there was blood, and he did not like that knowledge. He saw Ned Stark climb the steps. He saw the moment the man made his bargain with himself again, because bargains have to be made over and over once you begin. Ned spoke. He spoke the words Varys had wanted. He spoke them without bitterness, because bitterness would have broken them, and that would have broken what he was buying. He called himself traitor. He used the names the city had been taught to hate, and placed them on his own tongue. He thought of Bran's smile and of Arya's wild hair, and of the way Robb had once fallen flat, chasing a puppy, and laughed before he cried, and thought, "Go on then, pay." The city murmured. It did not quite know what to do with the taste of a man like this calling himself liar. It liked its lies spiced with arrogance, not humility. Joffrey made his face into a thing he had practiced. Cersei's hand flicked. Very small, a sign to someone who needed the comfort of a sign. Joffrey spoke. He spoke what no one had planned for him to speak. He spoke with the pleasure of a boy realizing he could make a room stop breathing. "Bring me his head," he said. The bells had not been tuned for this. The world made a sound that was not bells at all. Sansa made a small noise no one heard but her and the air just in front of her lips. Varys did not move. Cersei's eyes widened so little you would not have seen it if you had not been counting her lashes. Janos Slynt's mouth opened and then closed. His hand went up as if it had always been meant to go up. The crowd pushed forward with the curiosity men have for a cliff. The rest was speed and slowness, both. The swordsman came out of the glare with the light on his steel and the light on his face. Ned knelt because he had chosen this kneeling. He thought of snow one more time, and of the sound it makes when you step on it the first day of winter, and of the way it yields and holds at once. He thought of the heart tree's face. He thought, not of gods, but of wolves looking up. He put his hands out to balance himself, because even a man's last posture is worth getting right. And there the world hung, on a breath, on a heartbeat, on the instant between a boy's cruelty and a mother's calculation and a eunuch's plan and a city's appetite, on a raven beating its wings above Dragonstone with a ribbon tied to its leg, on a banner being raised in the far north, on a boat turning its nose south along a pebbled shore with no one to see it but gulls, on the sound the sword was about to make. The sword did not come. A clamor rose from the street of flower, a ripple that became a shout that became a running. Men poured like grain into the square. Someone threw a stone, and then remembered he had children to feed and picked up another, because you cannot feed anyone with an empty hand. The gold cloaks bristled. The hound barked 3 words. Harsh, precise, to the men near him who understood that sometimes the only way to keep a thing from breaking is to break other things. Cersei's hand, which had lifted the merest inch, did not fall. It hung there, the hesitation of a woman deciding whether her son was more king when obeyed or when defied. Joffrey squinted, as if the son had suddenly grown more clever. Varys's gaze cut toward Slynt. Littlefinger smiled, faint and interested. Slynt, given an excuse, took it like a lover's hand. "Hold!" he bellowed, and the immediate world obeyed as immediate worlds do, when an order sounds like other orders they have liked giving. Ned had exhaled, once. He did not pretend it was anything more than what it was. One more heartbeat. But a heartbeat is a room, sometimes, if you need it. The city roared. The Septies' bells, confused, tried to find the note they had been meant to make, and could not. The High Septon fumbled for a prayer, fat fingers slithering among his beads like eels. Slynt shouted again, this time at men who did not belong to him. And they hesitated because nothing in training teaches you what to do when an order is given that no one expected to hear. The swordsman lowered his blade a fraction and then lifted it again, because lowering is a habit hard to maintain in sunlight. Cersei calculated. Joffrey pouted. Sansa looked only at her father. Arya, beyond the walls, felt something in the air change without knowing why, and set her teeth as if she had bitten metal. A single raven crossed the square, low. No one noticed. It had a strip of parchment tied to its leg no longer than a man's finger. It was the sort of thing that might have made a different world end differently. It cut the light and was gone. In the confusion, in the breath, in that room of an instant, Varys leaned toward Janos Slynt and breathed a word. It was not a long word, and it was not a loud one, and it did not mean anything on a day when the city did not try to devour itself. On this day, it meant the difference between a sword up and a sword down. Slynt's eyes flicked. He gestured the swordsman back with a movement as small as regret. His grace will show mercy, Cersei said quickly, smoothly, her voice made of silk over a board. Mercy is a king's privilege. His grace will send the traitor to the wall. The Seven are merciful. We are merciful. The city will be merciful. She smiled with her mouth and with nothing else. We will also be obeyed. The crowd did what crowds do when they are given 2 contradictory things to be at once. It chose to believe the one that let it go home to supper. It grumbled and eased, and took its curiosity back to the places where curiosity is easier. Who had stolen whose stew? Who had kissed whose sister? The gold cloaks lowered their spears with visible relief at having an excuse not to break the day's last hour open like a skull. The swordsman blinked, twice, at the sunlight he had, a moment before, expected to be out of. Sansa swayed, and did not fall. Littlefinger gave her a small, neat smile that could have been kindness if it had been given by another man. Varys exhaled. Cersei kept her hand where it was for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and then withdrew it, leaving the heir to discover it no longer had something to lean on. They led Ned away. They did not let him touch his daughter. They did not let anyone see his face long enough to make a story out of it in that moment. Stories would come. They always did. The day, having opened its mouth to chew, closed it with a certain smugness. Night came down. It came down on Dragonstone with salt in it, and on Winterfell with the scent of earth cooling. On Riverrun with smoke and omens. On King's Landing with heat that would not go even when the sun did. It came down on a cart track north of the city where Arya learned the shape of the stars seen from between boards and told herself names she would not say in daylight. It came down on Renly's camp like velvet, and he lay awake counting the ways a crown could be put on a head and the ways it could be knocked off. It came down on Catelyn in a high room, her hands on the sill, her eyes on nothing she could change. It came down on Sansa, who fell asleep with the shape of a sword in her throat, even though the sword had not come, and dreamed of a boy who would forgive her for a letter she did not understand. It came down on Ned, who lay on a cot, and did not sleep at first, because sometimes the only way to carry a lie is to stay awake long enough to feel it stop shifting in you. When he did sleep, He dreamed of snow, plain and honest and cold. He dreamed of a heart tree and a boy with a dire wolf behind him, and a girl with a wooden sword. He dreamed of a man in a black cloak standing on a wall with the world falling away on both sides, and he could not see the man's face, and it did not matter. He dreamed, and the realm, having taken one more step toward the place men later call inevitable, went on breathing as if each breath were not being counted by hands unseen. Night broke into pieces in the Red Keep, which is how nights in that place always seem to end. Lanterns guttered in their cages and showed the stone as if it had grown older while it was dark. The men who had dragged Ned Stark from his cell dragged him back again, but more gently now, because the city was finished with its appetite for the day and did not wish to chew again so soon. He sat with his back against the wall and listened to his own breath and heard in it all the people he loved. The cell smelled faintly of rust and one old spill of wine, some jailer's mistake long ago that had left a ghost of sweetness. He closed his eyes and saw snow. He opened them and saw stone. He was a Stark of Winterfell, sitting in a square room in a city made of angles that did not fit him. And he had done a thing for his children, and would have to do it again and again, each morning until he was on a horse riding north. And perhaps after that too, if the wall could hold a man's bargains as well as it held winds. The door grated. He did not rise. He knew the sound of Varys' steps now, soft and careful as a cat's. "It is done," the eunuch said. He kept his voice low, as if they were in a room with other sleepers. "The boy has been given his mercy. We are all merciful, it seems." "And you said there would be a ship," Ned said. He did not put hope in the words. He put duty in them, which was heavier and disinclined to float. "Eastwatch," Varys murmured. "Do you remember the sea smell at White Harbor when you were a boy? It will be like that, only harder. There is weather on the Bay of Seals that does not come kindly to men." "I will take weather," Ned said, "and wind, and the sight of a sky that isn't caged." Varys inclined his head. "Not yet," he said, and exactly the right sorrow touched his mouth. "It is difficult even for me to move a live lord as if he were a sack of turnips. The queen has eyes even in the dark. The boy has moods even in sleep. Janos Slynt enjoys his purse even when he puts it under his pillow. It will be a day, a night. 2. I will bring word. In the meantime, you will say as little as you can and think as much as you must." "Think of what?" Ned asked. "The thought that I have lied sits wrong in me." "Think of the cold, my lord," Varys said. "If you think hard enough of it, you will be able to wear it like a shirt when you need it." He went away with a little bow, the kind a man makes to a face on a coin. The cell went back to stone and breath. Ned leaned his head back and let the wall take some of the weight. He thought of Joan's face at the parting in Winterfell's yard, how the boy had tried to keep himself from looking like a boy, and had failed, and Ned had loved him for it. He thought of Robb in the Great Hall, standing where a Stark is meant to stand. He thought of Sansa's careful letters and Arya's uncareful steps, and Bran's laughter before the fall and afterward too. The stubborn sound of it. He thought of Rickon sleeping with a wolf at his feet, as if that made him safe from dreams. He breathed, and the cell did not change shape, and he told himself that he could do this one thing as many times as he was asked to do it, and that would be enough to see him north. Outside, the city finished the day with a sort of sullen relief. In the Tower of the Hand, which belonged to no one now, and therefore belonged to the city itself, Littlefinger sat with a cup and looked at the flame in the hearth as if it were a number he had not yet added correctly. He thought of Janos Slynt's quick hand and quicker eyes, of the way Cersei's mouth had tightened when her son spoke his own will aloud. He composed in his head 3 conversations with Cersei, 2 with the boy, 1 with Varys. He eliminated the one with Varys, because conversations with Varys were never the ones you thought you were having. Down among the barracks, Janos Slynt took his purse out and put it back and took it out again, as if checking to see whether it was still heavy. He did not like the look on the queen's face when the prince had ordered the headsman. He liked the prince's face as an instrument. He did not like it as a thing that acted on its own. He told himself very firmly that he had done the realm a service, that city and king are the same word when you are paid to keep both standing. He did not lie awake long. Men like Janos sleep the way dogs do. with one ear that listens only for its own name. Cersei Lannister did not sleep so easily. She stood at a window and looked at the city as if she were reading a long letter written in a language she refused to learn. Joffrey had gone to bed pleased with himself, which is the way boys go to bed when they have discovered they can say a thing and men will do it. She had put her hand on his hair and told him he was very kingly, and then had stood and watched the dark where the river was and hated the way the water moved without asking anyone for leave. "He is a knife in his own hand," she said out loud to the room, because sometimes saying a thing makes it sit more quietly. "And I must teach him which part is the handle." Jaime lay on her bed with boots off and a wine cup on his stomach, which he balanced with a swordsman's delicacy. He tipped it and caught it again and did not spill. "You will," he said lazily. "You teach everyone." "He must not do that again," she said. "Not in a square full of people. Not when the realm is looking at us through 1,000 cracks. If he wants a head, he must learn to ask for it in a whisper and get it." "You always liked whispers," Jaime said, smiling with his eyes shut. "You married one once." She did not smile. "Stannis has sent letters. Renly has run away and has found his way into Mace Tyrell's dining room, where there is always room for one more plate. Tywin moves without telling me all of the steps he means to dance. And in the north, there are men who think the law has a shape. I will not give them a martyr. I will give them a father in black. They will wrap their honor around that and stroke it and leave us alone long enough to grow our claws." "Now." Jaime opened one eye. "You have claws enough," he said mildly. "I need the boys," she said. "And yours, and gold cloaks. And the man with no cock who pretends not to have teeth. And that little one with the rat's eyes who thinks coin is a god. I will need them all. This city is a pile of rope. If you pull the wrong one, everything comes down." "So do not pull wrong," Jaime said. He sat up. "Do you want me to speak to the boy?" "You cannot say the words I say," she said. "You cannot make them mean what I make them mean." She touched his face. "Go to the yard tomorrow and let them see you play at swords. Leave the boy to me." In Renly's camp south of the Mander, the night made the banners slow and solemn. Men sang, because the reach feeds men and feeding makes them sing. Renly moved through them at ease, the way a man moves among dogs that have been taught not to bite their master's hand. Loras rode back into the lamplight with dust on his greaves and victory on his mouth, even though no one had fought yet. Men were already becoming victory around him. It gathered the way sweat did and left stains on other men's clothes. "Mace will have you at Highgarden before the next moon is old," Loras said lightly. "He will serve you everything he has ever wanted to eat since he was a boy, and then he will tell you he invented the recipe. He will give you a chair and tell you how very well it suits you, and that he has always thought you would look handsomer sitting." "Men will like my handsomeness then," Renly said. "Men like what looks handsome. Women too," Loras said, with a smile that was both promise and joke. He dropped out of the saddle and led his horse toward the picket. "Stannis sends letters. You send smiles. You will get more with yours." Renly looked south where the dark swallowed the possibility of Old Town's far light. "I send more than smiles," he said. "I send the idea that men can be comfortable and proud, and not be asked to pretend they enjoy the taste of iron when there is lemon tart to be had. Stannis will make them eat iron and tell them it is truth. He may be right. He will be alone. Now, he will find fire," Loras murmured. "He has a woman who carries it around like a kettle." Renly frowned a little. "I have heard," he said. "We will have wineskins handy if she comes too close. I like my fires where I can see them, not in anyone's eyes." In the Eyrie, there were fires that had to be coaxed. Because the air was so thin, the flames mistrusted it. Lysa Arryn walked with her son between dressed stone and the white that did not dirty with weather because weather did not come up so far. She told him about the people below who would hurt him if they could, and about the gods above who watched particularly tenderly when a lady took care to pray prettily. When Catelyn came to her, she had the letter from Stannis in her glove and her patience under it, and she set both out like dishes on a table, and Lysa refused them both. "I will not make war," Lysa said, with a fixed little smile that made a stranger of her mouth. "War takes men away from their wives. War takes sons. I will not let the veil crack, because a man in the east wants to tell me what names to say when I go to sleep. Menshau. Names are not the same as law, Catelyn said carefully. And not the same as murder. Lysa's eyes flashed. A quick child's. Murder is a word the South uses when it is being looked at, she said, and stroked her son's hair, as if that were proof of anything. We are high. We are safe. You should be safe with us. The world cannot reach you here. The world reaches everywhere, Catelyn said. Even this. Especially this. Towers like this invite it. She did not raise her voice. There was no point. She had learned in childhood that sometimes you cannot make a door open with words. You have to go around. They will climb these steps, Lysa said, with the slightly wondering tone of a woman speaking of a fever dream. They will try to take him from me. They will fall and fall and fall, and the sound will be like coins. Catelyn bowed her head to that madness because bowing your head to a wind sometimes lets you breathe. I must go, she said. Father needs me. My husband is to be sent to the wall. Lysa's mouth made a little "oh." Then you will be safe, she said brightly. Wolves live there in the cold. Men write songs about such things. You could be in a song. Catelyn left because there was nothing else left to do. Brynden Tully went with her because he had no patience for walls that kept out the world while keeping foolishness in. They went down the mountain as careful as prayers and did not look back at the white stones. In Winterfell, the ravens had come and gone and left the air with the sense that truth had been in it for a moment. Robb stood with Grey Wind lying with his chin on his paws, and his amber eyes half-lidded, and Maester Luwin's voice in his ear, careful and cool. The Riverlands burn, Luwin said. Your grandfather weakens. Your uncle rides. All this whether your father lives to be cold on a wall or not. The North will be asked to choose. It is better to choose standing up than pushed from behind. Robb looked at the banners folded in the chest in the corner. They smelt of old smoke even when folded, the way cloth does when it has been near men and fire. If I call them, he said quietly, and the South says my father is to be sent to the wall, they will call me rebel. They will, Luwin said, the word gentle. They will call you that, no matter when you call, if you call at all. Men in cities like to have names for the things that disturb their rest. Theon Greyjoy leaned against the doorpost and toyed with a dagger, drawing it a little from the sheath, and sliding it back again because that is what boys do when they want to look like men. Call, he said. You have to call. If the Riverlands burn and your mother is there, and your uncle fights, and your grandfather is old, you must. No man will think less of you for holding your father's life above your supper. Memsau. Robb lifted a hand and Grey Wind's ear flicked as if the wolf had been commanded without words. My father told me once, Robb said, that men can do the hard thing and the wrong thing, and they are sometimes the same. I will not call because I am angry. I will not call to save my name. I will call because the Riverlands burn. I will call because if the North is a pack, then the pack goes where the fire is and puts it out with blood. Benchau. He looked at Luwin. The maester's eyes were small and kind as winter's sun. Send the ravens, Robb said. His voice surprised him. It sounded like it belonged to a man who had not learned it from anyone. Call the banners. They came. The North sent men the way a mountain sends stones when snow loosens. Soil in spring. Riders came with the blue bear of Mormont and with owls, with mermen and flayed men and pine trees and the black and white of Karstark Akar. They came with dogs and axes, and with bread on their saddles, and with songs they sang through their teeth. The Greyjohn came shouting and laughing and promising to drink blood, and then reminding you it was a jest. Lady Mage Mormont came with her jaw set, and her daughter Dacey beside her with a spear and a look as steady as any man's. Wyman Manderley sent words ahead of his men, and the words weighed as much as he did. They filled Winterfell's yard until even the stones looked as if they had been asked to hold their breath. Robb stood among them with Grey Wind not quite at his heel, because wolves do not heal, and men should not expect them to. The Greatjon made a speech without being asked. because the Great John never needed asking to make a noise. "We go south to fix what the south has done," he bellowed. "We go because the trout is our friend, and the lion has taken to killing calves near our fields, and the wolf does not stand for that unless he's an old broken dog, and I don't see old broken dogs here." When he drew his sword in enthusiasm and waved it too close, men around him laughed. Then they quieted all at once because Grey Wind had moved, and no one was altogether sure where until the wolf was on the Great John, with his paws on the big man's chest, and his jaws on his wrist just hard enough. Blood came bright and honest. The Great John looked down and then up into Rob's face, and then he laughed again, a deeper laughter. "I was just seeing if the cub had teeth," he roared, and held his bleeding wrist high as if it were a prize. "He does. He has. The old kings would be pleased to see it." Nendro. After, the old men repeated to each other the words they had heard Rob say to the Great John. "You will hold your tongue and your temper both when you stand beside me." It sounded like a sentence made from Winterfell's stones. That night, they unrolled the maps on the hall table and put cups on corners to keep them from curling. Roderick Castle traced a finger down the neck. "Moat Catelyn," he said, and when he said the name the other men fell quiet, as men do when an old word comes out in a room. "You will take your men through these causeways and hold them. South of that, the land opens like a man throwing his arms wide and laughing at you. You need to get through the choke, you need to get clear, and you cannot do both at once. You must be quick but not hurried." "We have the numbers," Dian said, eager. "We will run them over." "We have the north," Sir Roderick said. "The neck does not care for numbers." Rob listened. Grey Wind's breath warmed his trouser leg. He asked questions. He was told which castles had bread, and which had honey, and which were fond of their own jam. He learned which men could be trusted to lead, and which could be trusted to follow, and which could be trusted only to be pointed at a particular problem and set loose. He did not sleep much, but he slept some. And the sleep had the hard edges of a man falling on a stone floor and not complaining about it. When dawn came, the banners lifted in the yard and made the light look like something you could touch. They filed out through Winterfell's gate, and men on the wall stood and watched and felt their throats tight, because there is a kind of pride that hurts as it arrives. Bran and Rickon stood with Luwin and Hodor. The little boy had one hand on the great simple man's arm, and the other clenched in a fist because he was trying to hold himself still. The ravens in the rookery clattered as the first horn blew, a sound as old as the stones. On the road north of King's Landing, where the cart path shakes itself free of the last garbage, and the smell becomes more honest, Yoren's cart rolled with its patient creak. Arya had found the holes in the boards where the light came, and the holes where rain would come, if rain came. And she learned their shapes so that when night fell, she could still see them in her head and know where morning would be. She learned the smell of the men Yoren had gathered, which was work and old fear, and the sort of stubbornness you get from making yourself do clever things with your hands, when the world has given you no reason to be clever at all. She kept her mouth shut. She kept her little sword wrapped in an old shirt under the straw, and told herself it was not because she feared anyone would take it, but because swords do not like to be shown off. They stopped at a place where a brook crossed the road and made both better. Yoren let the oxen drink, and the boys who would be men and men who had been boys too long splashed water on their faces, and swore at how good it felt. A boy with a bull's horn helm sat on a rock, and watched with the stillness of a cat, sunning itself. Arya took him for older than he was because stillness is something older men learn. This boy had it as if life had taught him early, and often not to move unless he meant it. "You're one of us?" she asked him finally, when she had watched him not watching her long enough. "I'm going to the wall," he said without looking away from the water. "So, I'm one of whatever that is. Yoren says it's a black. He says men turn to crows. I don't have feathers." "What's your name?" Arya asked. "Gendry," he said. He did not offer hers back, and she did not offer it up. They sat like that for a while, and then the black brother, who had a voice like gravel, told them to get back on the cart, and so they did, as if they had always meant to. That evening, when the light slanted and made the dust look golden instead of dirty, a rider came up the road behind them at a trot, and slowed when he reached the cart. He wore a half-cloak the color of sand, and a look like a man who had never quite had enough sleep. Yoren raised his head and hawked and spat, a greeting. "Where are you bound?" the rider asked, tone easy. "North," Yoren said. "Everything north is full," the man said. He smiled a narrow smile. "Full of men with ideas." "Men with ideas don't ride in carts," Yoren said. "No," the rider agreed. He put a hand on the cart's plank as if to lean and then did not. "You have a boy with a bull's horn helm, one of the master armorer's lads?" his master asked after him. Yoren looked beyond the man to the empty road that went to the city, and to the further road that went away from it, to the way the hedges leaned. "I'll be sure to tell the wall you brought kind regards," he said, and turned his head and spat again, and the rider's mouth tightened just enough to show he had understood more than most. They watched him go. "Gold cloaks," Yoren grunted after a while. "We'll have more of that. We'll keep to side roads when we can. Keep your mouth shut, boy," he added to Gendry, though he was looking at Arya when he said it. "Good," Arya said, which surprised him into a short bark of a laugh. In King's Landing the morning came with the dust high already, promising a day that would taste of iron and fruit. Sansa woke with a feeling like a song she had half forgotten, and then remembered she had dreamed her father dying, and that he had not died, and her stomach lurched with relief and shame both. Septa Mordane told her she must dress very well, because when a city has been given a spectacle, it expects a second course, even if it is only a new gown. Cersei received her with a smile that had very little to do with teeth. "Your father will go to the wall," she said, soft as milk that has not been warmed. "It is a great honor. Men sing of it. In the north, they must love songs of such things." "Then whined she." Sansa nodded. She had learned to nod with a small, neat movement that did not disturb her hair. "I am very grateful." she said, and meant it with all the young strength of her heart, which had not yet learned how easily gratitude turns to debt when other people hold it. "You will be more grateful," Cersei said, just as softly, "if you remember that my son is a king who likes his kindness praised. You will praise it. You will tell your brother to kneel when he comes. He will come. He is a boy. Boys like to show that they are men. Have him show it by bowing nicely." Sansa imagined Robb riding into the yard at the Red Keep, his head high, gray wind at his stirrup, and then imagined him kneeling. The two pictures did not fit in one frame. She said what she had been told was true, because it is not always the same as what is. "He will do what is best for our house." Cersei's mouth curved. "Most people do," she said, "even when they do not know it." On Dragonstone, the sea went slate, and then silver, and then gray again, as clouds trousered the horizon and walked away. Stannis stood with Davos and looked out at the thin line of a ship leaving by the South Channel, hugging the island's tooth to hide its departure a little. Davos had men aboard it. He had put them there himself, and had told each man a thing he wanted him to think on when the weather turned. "You are sending me to beg," Davos said mildly. He did not mind the word. He had begged before when a man Jon Arryn would later punish had his hand halfway to Davos' throat and had called him smuggler and worse. Begging saved mouths sometimes. "I'm sending you to tell the truth," Stannis said. "If they hear it as begging, that is their shame. You will go to White Harbor. You will remind Lord Manderley that his oaths are to the realm, and not to a woman's son who was not his kin's. You will ask for ships. They will feed me," Davos said, as if thinking aloud. "They will pour me good wine, and their lord will tell me he loves truth, and his steward will tell me that 3 of their ships are on a crab run, and 2 are in need of new sails, and 1 is in for repairs. He will say this while his finger writes in the spill of his wine, because he does not want to look me in the eye when he lies to me. And I will thank him for the wine and leave. Then leave his steward with a thought that makes him spit in his master's soup," Stannis said. "Tell him that I am the only man who will make sure the laws reach the north when kings change. Rich men like that thought. It lets them feel poor and virtuous while keeping their coin. Shall I light a fire for you as well?" Davos asked dryly, and Stannis' mouth twitched, which for him was wild laughter. Light none, he said. If Melisandre wishes to be fire enough for both of us, let her. I do not need flames to make my case. I have a book. Maester Cresson was there, bent and quiet, eyes reddened by candle smoke and stubbornness. He had the book Stannis meant, the one the late hand had read until his lungs forgot how to be lungs. He held it as if it were a weapon he had been trained in and did not like. Law is a candle, he said softly. On certain days, wind will take it no matter how careful you are. It is still worth lighting. It is, Stannis said, but I will not pretend it gives warmth. Cresson looked beyond Stannis to where Melisandre came with her patient step and her red hair naming a different kind of heat. The old man felt a spiteful tenderness that was not kind toward himself. He had loved children once and seen them die, and he had loved lords and seen them become kings, which is another death. My lord, he said, more to the heir than to either of them, be wary of fires that promise not to go out. I am wary of everything, Stannis said, and turned away. When Davos went down to the small harbor, the smell of tar and wet oak and old rope filled him with the sort of comfort a man finds in a shirt he has mended himself. Salad Horsan's big Lysine carrack rode out beyond the mouth on an oily swell, bright as a brothel in daylight. Men on the pier muttered the way men do when their eyes see coin and their tongue wishes to call that coin sin. Davos did not care for Salah's flags or for the way the Lysine laughed. But the man brought ships when he said he would, which was more than could be said for prayer. Old friend, Salah boomed from a boat, and Davos accepted the word with the same patience he accepted bad wine at a lord's table. You take to water again. It will not kill you yet. Not if I can help it, Davos said, climbing down into the boat with a man's care for his knees. Lord Stannis asks me to plead to a fat man. Ah, fat men, Salah said. They say yes to everything and then do what the wind says. You bring him a wind, Davos, or a fat purse. He laughed at his own joke as if it had been two jokes. Davos endured him, because you endure winds and currents when your course is set. In the Riverlands it was not wind but heat that moved men. Edmure stood with his hands on the parapet and stared down at the tumblestone like a man staring into an answer he cannot use. The fords were muddy with men. The banners of House Vance and Piper fluttered with the earnest misery of men who were about to be brave in the wrong numbers. Scouts came and went with their mouths tight and their eyes wider than any man likes to see in his own mirror. Sir, a captain said, voice careful. Voice the way you talk to a man with his hand in a trap. Gregor has burned Scherer and took the folk of Windish town. He rides toward the Acorn Hall, they say. Sir Beric's men did not catch him. They caught a rumor and a ransom, and came away with both and lost 5 good men to arrows they never saw. Edmure nodded. He could not feel his feet. He had been a boy in those fields once. He had put frogs in his sister's beds and climbed apple trees he was not supposed to climb. The river had smelt of frogs and apple leaves and fish guts and the garrison's old leather. It smelt now of horses and sweating men and the ash of places that had had curtains and children. He wanted his father. He wanted any man who would take his hand and say, "Stand here," he said in his own voice. "We will hold the fords." They would not. It is the sorrow of certain days that you can hear them coming and cannot change their feet. At the Crossroads Inn, the girl with the unremarkable face and the arms like willow switches served stew to men who were not as hungry as they thought they were. She looked out at the yard sometimes and saw dust and more dust, and a boy practicing with a spear and not smiling while his friend told him a very funny story indeed. The road from Duskendale brought a pair of men with yellow cloaks over their steel and a 3.5 cloak, the color of sand. They asked questions in voices so polite that the lash of the words went deeper. The innkeep answered carefully, because he was a man who had decided long ago that you could live by serving stew, and that meant you had to learn when to be deaf. The yellow men left. Later the boy with the bull's horn helm came to the well and pumped water as if he had always done it. The unremarkable girl gave him a mug, and he nodded like a lord, though his hands were blistered. "Thank you," he said. His mouth made the words awkwardly, as if it had not been made to say them often. "You're with the Black One," she said. "Where will you go?" "North," he said. He drank. It was not an answer. She did not press him, because in certain seasons words cost, and she had none to lend. Near midnight, when the yard had gone quiet, except for the horses' low shifts, and the sound of Yoren snoring like a rasp, the men in yellow came back. They came softly. Yoren was awake before the last of their steps gently the mead's scent. He did not move from his bed of straw at once, but his eyes opened, and the dark understood immediately that it had lost any advantage it had had. They spoke at the door, just loud enough to be heard. By order of the hand, one said, and Yoren smiled a little at that, because he had known a hand who would have signed that order, and another who would not, and he was not sure which had the writing of it now. The boy with the bull's horn helm. Yoren stood and no one heard the straw. These boys belong to the night's watch, he said. I took them with the king's leave. The king's mother's leave is more to the point, the yellow man said, and smiled a smile that made the innkeep's daughter look quickly at the floorboards. Give him to us, and we will go, and you will keep your teeth. Yoren looked past them into the yard where the moon laid its thin hand. He looked at Gendry, who had not moved except to close his fingers over the wood of the pump handle. He looked at Arya, a thin shadow by the door, and said, without saying it, "Do not," he said out loud. "Come the morning we ride. I have a writ for the king's men. The king's men can argue with their supper." The Goldcloaks had not come to argue. They came to sample the inn's silence and found it thin. They moved forward. Yoren spat and ducked and came up with a bit of wood in his hand that became a cudgel, because he had decided it was one. He put one man on his knees and another on his back, and took a cut on his shoulder, and did not grunt, because he didn't like to give men the satisfaction. Gendry moved then, with the sudden violence of a thrown stone, and the inn yard filled with the sounds of men who had expected to be obeyed, and were astonished to have to work instead. Arya did not draw her little sword. Yoren's eyes had been on her without looking. She did not draw because she had been told not to. And obedience can be courage too when the shape of a fight is not yet learned. She picked up a pebble. Silly little choice, and threw it, and struck a man's cheek, and made him turn his head at exactly the instant when Gendry's stick came, and made that turn into a mistake. They went away at last, muttering threats, leaving a smell of oil and damp and arrogance. Yoren stood breathing like a smith's bellows, and looked at Arya and at the boy. "You," he said to Gendry, "are a hammer. Men with hammers should practice swinging. You, to Arya, are a needle. Needles don't throw stones. Needles find eyes. Keep your mouth shut, and your feet under you and your hands where they will do the only good they can. Sleep. We ride before the sun decides it wants to take its time." They rode. The road shouldered them, as if it were used to the weight of men trying to slip between the prints of larger feet. In the Red Keep, the small council met because it must. Pycelle wheezed and fussed, and replaced one chain with another, and then realized no one had noticed, which hurt him in ways he could not admit. Littlefinger smiled and told an unfunny story about 3 merchants who built their warehouses too close to the river, and watched them be eaten by it, and Varys listened to the sound Cersei's rings made on the table when she tapped them, one by one. "We will send the traitor north," she said, as if settling which wine to have with supper. "We will put men we trust on the road with him. We will put men we do not trust with them, so they do not get bored. We will send the girl with him or not, as seems best when the morning comes. The other girl has gone already, some say. If she has gone, she will either get to where she is going, or she will not. I do not spend coin on maybes." "Then so." Pycelle put his hands together so that his sleeves hid their shaking. "The realm rejoices at your mercy," he managed. "The realm will rejoice at a fair held on the street of steel if we hang banners and pass out kittens," Cersei said. "The realm is a child. It wants sweets. We will give them to it where we can and tell it to eat its meat where we must. Men are riding to banners," Varys said mildly. "The north is awake. The Riverlands are awake. The Reach is singing. Nebemsau. Men always ride to banners." Cersei said, "When they arrive, We will ask them whether they have come for a song or a quarrel. We have both. Littlefinger folded his hands. There is also the matter of the king's brother, he said. The one who writes letters. He writes them well. One almost believes him honest when one reads them. He is honest, Cersei said. Honesty is his disease. We will cure him with fire if we must. You will find that catching him to apply the cure will be the difficult part, Littlefinger murmured. He has no lover, no song, no debt you can hold over him. He has only law. It is like trying to bribe a wind. One can do it, but one needs very heavy gold coins and a very understanding sky. Then we will take his wind away, Cersei said. We will tell the city that he is a jealous old maid with a book. The city likes men who are not old and not maids. We have one. He will be king. Joffrey had his lessons with a man who had learned to make truths taste like peppermints. He scowled at them, because boys do not like peppermints if you tell them they have to. He pressed a seal into soft wax with too much force, and had to do it again, and snarled, and then laughed because it had come out right the second time. Your Grace, the man said politely, mercy is a crown that does not weigh. My mother says mercy is something you wear so that other people do not trip on you, Joffrey said carelessly. He held his seal up to admire it. I will wear it, and then I will take it off, and use the thing under it. The thing under it? The man asked, sweating. My head, Joffrey said, and smiled at the thought of it, as if it were a new toy. Tyrion Lannister, far away from that bright room and its peppermints, slept on moss and woke to the raw ache in his shoulders that comes from too much saddle and too little wine. Bronn lay at his side with his sword under him, and one eye half open like a cat that has never truly trusted comfort. The veil lay behind them like a door shut hard. Ahead, the river country stank of smoke and cooked meat, and the particular reek that comes when men have been frightened recently in numbers. You chose your champion well, Bronn said, when they reined up on a hill that had once been something's back. He has a good sense of when to duck. I like a man who can make a little speed when the rock is coming down, Tyrion said, and looked west with his eyes narrowing against the low sun. My father plays at war as if it were Savas. He will have moved a piece to surprise me by now. He always enjoys that. He smiled without joy. He will enjoy less the sight of me, a piece he did not expect. Moving myself here. They found Lord Tywin at a place that had never needed a name until men with banners gave it one. Something with a ford and a mill and a burned house. His tent was wine-colored, and his patience was dry. He stared at Tyrion as if he had been a letter in a hand he did not like. Then he put a hand on his son's shoulder, the way a man does on a chair he intends to use. You are late, Tywin said. I'm alive, Tyrion said. Most fathers I have heard of prefer that. You have heard wrong, Tywin said. He turned to the map on his table. You will go to King's Landing when I tell you to. You will make men who enjoy liking themselves like us. You will make the boy do as he is told. You will make his mother remember that she is a vase and not the shelf. Now, I am not a mummer, Tyrion said lightly. You are what I tell you to be, Tywin said. Now drink, and then sleep, and then do what you are told. Tyrion drank. The wine was very good and tasted of nothing. He slept. In his sleep, he dreamed of a bird with gold feathers and a mouth full of law. When he woke, he had forgotten it, and remembered his father's eyes, and decided he preferred the bird. The day they sent for Ned Stark to be moved from his cell. The sky was clean and blue. An honest color. Varys came with the jailer and spoke cords and curtains, and made them into a harness that fastened around the pieces of the day and pulled. They brought Ned up with no fanfare, and took him not to the yard but down a side stair where the stones were damp, and the air smelled of wet tin. A door with a bar opened, and a wharf lay beyond. The river lapped with that lazy confidence rivers have under walls. Yoren waited in a boat with two others, and their oars already wet. He looked older by 7 days than he had when Arya had climbed into his cart, which is a trick some men learn. He did not smile when he saw Ned. He did not scowl. He nodded, once, the way a man nods to the understanding in his own bones. We go quiet, he said. And we go fast, and we don't look back." Ned paused, because a pause was a luxury he might not have again soon. Varys touched his sleeve. "If you look," the eunuch said softly, "you will see the girl." Ned did not. He wanted to with a wanting that made his hands ache, but he did not. He got into the boat and sat. The oars bit the water, and the boat slid. Above them, gulls wrote meaningless letters in the air, and no one read them. They took him to a ship that had been waiting with its sails wrapped, and its mouth shut. Men aboard it moved the way men do when they have been told not to think too loudly. Ned went below and found a narrow place he could sit and not quite stretch his legs. Varys leaned in the doorway for a moment, like a man who had remembered something important that he did not intend to share. "Do not die on the way," he said. "It would make fools of all of us." "I have made enough of myself," Ned said. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes and listened to the sound of water against wood, which is a sound older than honor. The ship put out into the river. The city slipped by, not looking, pretending to busy itself with its ropes and its smells. On the eastern wind, faint as a promise, came the smell of open water. Men above him swore quietly in the language of sailors, that old, comfortable cursing that is half prayer. Ned breathed and the breath went with the ship and did not return. News outruns ships. Before the sails filled, rumors had tied a knot in themselves all through the court. Sansa stood alone in a small garden with a lemon tree that had been coaxed into fruit, and tried to imagine the wall the way songs did, white and wide and noble. She tried to make the picture pretty, because prettiness had been the work of her life. The tree's leaves shivered. The city's heat dulled even the smell of lemon. Cersei met with Littlefinger in a room that had tapestries with too much green in them, as if someone had ordered a forest and accepted a swamp. She sipped wine and did not drink it. "It is done," she said. "It is," Littlefinger agreed, smiling the way a man smiles when he hears the sound of a coin balanced on its edge. "Men will be grateful. Gratitude is a river with a slow current, but it runs." "Make it run where I want," Cersei said. "I will try," he said. "I will fail. I will try again. I will make it seem as if it is your doing when it works, and blame other men when it does not. This has been my craft." She almost laughed. "And the other brother? Renly?" He spread his hands as if weighing perfume. "He is sunshine. He thinks that makes him fire. He will find out otherwise, or he will not. But in either case the flowers will love him for a season. Stannis is winter. No one loves winter. They respect it. They build for it. If he makes himself felt, it will not be in ballads." "Da." She set the cup down, and the sound it made was very small. "Then let us give the singers a boy," she said. "The boy will give them himself. We will hang tapestries in his name and tell the city which songs are permitted in the streets." "You can tell," Littlefinger said. "But songs are stubborn. They breed under doors. They climb out of wells. They find corners in men's mouths even when those mouths are full of meat." "Then we will fill mouths with meat," Cersei said flatly, "and put knives in those that prefer to sing." Out on the water, just far enough from the city that its voice was a murmur, Ned came up and leaned on the rail and let the wind lay its cool hand on his face. He looked west, because men from the north always look west if they have the choice, west where the sun would go, west toward Winterfell. He saw nothing but the thin horizon and the white of cormorants rolling and righting themselves like kings in bad chairs. He thought of the wall as a stone line that would let him be small upon it. He thought of cold. He thought of how a lie sits in a man's mouth like a bit. A small boat came alongside in the dusk, with 2 oars, and one man hunched under a plain cloak, and the quick, nervous movements of a man who has learned to hide his usefulness under obedience. He climbed easily, as if this ladder had been made for him, because ladders always are for men like this. "You are making me do too much at once," Varys said, and for once did not pretend to be other than he was. "The queen is watching from 3 places. The boy pretends to be asleep. Janos Slynt watches his purse. The river has its own eyes. I have done more difficult things with worse men. I do not boast. I do not like doing things with so many ends." "Why?" Ned asked. "Because it is always worth putting the simplest question to a man who does not expect it." Varys' mouth softened. "Because too many ends make a knot that will not come undone without blood. I prefer knots that will sit quietly until I decide to pull them. This one will tighten on its own if the wind freshens. Do not die on the way," he said again. "If you do, men will make stories, and I will have to hear them until I grow old. And I am tired of stories." The boat slid away. The ship turned its nose toward the east for a time, to find water that was deep enough to let it forget the shore for an hour. Ned went below and lay on his back and counted his breaths until they lost their numbers and became the seas. He did not sleep at once. Sleep came later, and when it did, he dreamed not of snow, but of the Winterfell kitchens, of bread, of smoke, and yeast and coats hung on pegs in the entry, with the snow melting off them. He woke with the taste of it still in his mouth, which was as good a way to wake as any. When dawn burned the river dull gold. A boy on a fish market quay told his mother he had seen a ship go by in the night, with no lanterns, and only one voice on it. The mother told him not to tell stories when there was work to be done. He shrugged and helped her gut a barrel of the day's first catch, and thought nothing of it again. In White Harbor, Wyman Manderley's hall was full of the sort of heat that comes not from flames, but from kitchens that do not mind people being fed. He listened to Davos Seaworth's plain talk, and stroked his chin, and gave orders to a steward about pies, because a good host remembers the way men's work when their stomachs are full. He said all the right things and meant several of them, and kept the rest for later. When Davos told him that law was the law, and that a crown could not sit on a boy's head because a woman's lies wished it so, he nodded as if Davos were telling him how tides worked. "Tides are a nuisance," Wyman said finally. "We build our docks only to see them made foolish twice a day. The law is a tide. It will pull, no matter how you fasten your boats. I will keep mine afloat. If you drown, I will sing a song that makes it sound sad." "Sing it loudly," Davos said. "I always do," Wyman said, and smiled. And the smile was not entirely unkind. Letters ran north even as Davos went south without knowing it. The world will do this. They reached Robb as he crossed the neck, with a column that could not be made quiet, because the North does not do anything quietly when it is on the move. Geese rose from the marsh with insulted cries. The men's feet learned which parts of the stones held and which would slide. The bog's green smell rose and made even seasoned men twitchy, because green is the color of comfort until it is not. The crannogmen came out of the reeds like thoughts that had been hiding from themselves and were now forced to step into the light. Howland Reed's messengers did not bow. They did not say much either. They offered fish and a braided grass charm and information. Which is the best food? They told him of Lannister riders seen at Seaguard's outskirts, and a host at the Golden Tooth, and another on the Green Fork, with yellow men and lions both. They told him that the neck belonged to itself, and that was good news for men who belonged to the north. When he came through Moat Cailin, Robb looked up at the old towers with their scabby stone and the snakes that basked, and called this place home. And he felt very small and very large at once. Men told him stories as they walked. How kings had bled here and oaths had been made that held for 100 years, and then were forgotten in a day and remembered again in songs. He listened. The air smelled different south of the moat. It had more dust in it, and the dust had a different grit. He was a stark moving south with a wolf at his side, and men behind him, and maps in his head. Far ahead, in a city he did not intend to look at for long, a boy put on a crown and made faces at his own image. To the east, a man on an island lit no fires and watched a woman who did. To the south, under green banners, a different boy practiced standing like a king while older men applauded his posture. In between, men rode. In between, rumor. In between, letters, some tied to birds, some just put into mouths and sent out into air with the expectation that air would grow them wings. The morning Ned Stark's ship found open sea enough to taste the true salt. A wind came up from the west, the sort of wind that makes men think of luck. The captain raised a cautious bit of canvas, and watched the strain, and eased off, and then raised again, the careful dance of a man who knows how to ask the sky for favors without making himself ridiculous. By noon the city had shrunk to a smudge. By evening there was only the line and the promise of colder nights. Ned stood as long as his legs would let him, and then sat, and then lay down and listened to the ship talk to itself, the way ships do. He said no prayers, because he had told all his words to the men he needed to. He let the sea do the rest. Sansa watched the light on the city's walls, and told herself that it was beautiful. When men whispered around her that the king had been merciful, and that the traitor had been sent away, she nodded at the right moments. She did not cry in company. In private, she pressed her face into a pillow and said words to the mother and the maiden, both until the words lost their shapes. She did not know what Arya was doing, and not knowing was a hole she could not stop stepping into. Arya ate with her fingers and learned to sleep with one ear and the corner of one eye. She thought of wolves. She thought of Sirio's voice saying, "Left," and of the way he had smiled as if all of this were a dance in a room with clean floors. She did not think of Sansa, except the way you think of a hand you cannot use when you need it most. She did not think of father because thinking of him made the road go longer. She told herself the names of the streets she had run through on the last day. Rattle Alley, the Street of Seeds, Ironman's Way, as if naming could make a map inside her that would always point north. On Dragonstone, Maester Cresson took up a vial and looked at it for a long time, and then he put it down again and rubbed his eyes, and told himself that old men have no business thinking they can still save the world with tricks. He thought of Stannis as he had been as a boy, dour and correct and honest and lonely, a boy who could not be made to laugh at things other boys had laughed at until crying. And he thought of Melisandre and the look in her eyes when she spoke of fires. He thought of paths the island had not taken when Robert had lived and drunk and laughed and made things easy until he had made them impossible, and he sighed and lit a candle with slow care. Law was a light. Perhaps that would be enough. Perhaps not. He was too old for perhapses, but here they were. Melisandre stood at the window above him and watched the night settle like a robe. She did not pray aloud. She did not need to. In her mind, the words she loved were already the world's fire, and whether or not the world had yet learned what it was warming its hands at did not trouble her. She smiled. It was a small thing. It set no rooms alight. Not yet. Far offshore, a wind changed its mind. Which is the sort of thing winds do when they find themselves bored. The ship that carried Ned Stark took the change into its sails, as if the cloth had been made for this single breath. It healed, and then found its balance, and made better way. Men on deck grinned without knowing they were grinning. Somewhere in the dark below, Ned's eyes opened. He did not know why. He listened. He slept again. The sea worked while he did. By the time dawn pulled itself over the edge of the world, the ship had put miles between itself and all things that could be counted by men who lived in rooms. The gulls were fewer. The sky was larger. In a thin room under stone, a queen woke and decided which color she would make the day. In a camp south of Bitterbridge, a young man woke with a name in his mouth that was not his yet, and tasted it, and told himself that it was very sweet. In Winterfell's yard, a boy with legs too short for his longing watched a wolf yawn, and decided he would pretend not to be cold. The realm held its breath again, a new breath. Because that is what realms do when men move them. The letters had flown. The answers would come in the form of feet and hooves and sails. There would be time for counting. For now, there was only the sound of men in armor, and men without it, and the old noises of a world making itself heard through them. River, wind, fire, wolves, the scrape of a quill, the clatter of a pot, the hollow ring of a pot, the hollow ring of a smith's hammer, a child's small laugh. All of it went on while men decided the shape of the next days, and while a ship pointed its nose toward a place where the cold kept its own counsel, and a man who had bent would have to learn how to stand again.